And welcome everybody into the Mind Sculptors. I'm your host, Callahan, and boy do we have a great show of some non-stop competitive EDH talk lined up for you today. Whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Google, however it is, we appreciate you. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and leave us a like and subscribe. That really helps us out. And if you also want to go and help support the show, head on over to Patreon, where you can subscribe and get access to our Discord server. Joining me today for this conversation is going to be Phoenix and Pongo. How are you guys doing today?
Going well.
Doing great.
Good to hear it. We've got a very special guest lined up for you guys today. He is from one of the bigger competitive EDH channels, one of the more well-known throughout the community. Welcome everybody in. This is Ryan from Playing with Power. Ryan, thanks for stopping in. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being able to come on. I love having you on. So, but why we had you on is we're going to be doing a commander tier list today. So what we're going to be doing is some of the new ones, some of the old ones, all those competitive EDH commanders that you know and love. We're going to go through and rate them and give them, really tell you, the listeners, the definitive ranking of where all these commanders lie. So the first one up is going to be Jeska Thrice Reborn. And, you know, we're very gracious here. We're very polite. So because you're the guest, Ryan, you're going to go first.
Jeska Thrice Reborn is still pretty new. What I like about Jeska is she can technically be an infinite mana sink. And you can kill the table with her. You have to be able to essentially recast her over and over, which is really cool. She doesn't work with food chain mana, which makes me a little sad. The first thing I thought with her was, hey, you know, you can kill the table in your command zone, which is great, but she didn't work with food chain, which kind of knocked her down a little bit for me. Mm-hmm. So really, I think it depends, because simply it depends on what partner you're pairing her with and what your strategy is. She's in red, so you open yourself up to dockside shenanigans, which is great. Very powerful right now. Really just depends on the commander. Oh, it's so early to tell. I almost want to reserve judgment. You're making me go first. Oh,
I am making you go first.
I would put her, I don't know, maybe put her, because she's infinite mana. I'm sorry, since she's an infinite damage in the command zone, but she's not able to go fetch the combo piece. She's not able to do that kind of stuff. I would put her maybe in the B to C range.
Okay.
Maybe.
So somewhere in there.
Yeah, I would maybe put her there. I like that she's got partners, so maybe something else can go grab it or something.
I like that it's just regular partner, not partner with.
Yes, I agree with that, which has been a huge thing in this set. I really like that they did that. So I would put her probably. My gut instinct tells me C, but everyone else can tell me how wrong I am. So
okay. Well, Pongo, how wrong is he?
Well, you know, you raised some good points, Ryan. You know, about her being an infinite mana outlet and everything. You know, I hear you, and I agree that these are all definitely pros in favor of Jeska. You know, I think on paper she has a lot going for her. Enough certainly that she can helm, you know, probably some of the best decks in the format. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to say, being a planeswalker and all, she seems a little bit like a try-hard type pick. You know, like, this is Commander we're talking about. You're supposed to play creatures as your commanders. Like, I never really got down with the whole, like, planeswalkers can be your commander. So she's going to be a solid, I think, like, D for me.
Planeswalkers were a mistake.
Aw. So you don't ride the Teferi train, the Temporal Archmage train?
That train has left the station a long time ago.
But I don't know. I like that train. It's old school to me.
It is old school.
Yeah.
I feel Pongo and I were talking about this last night when we were planning this a little bit. It's like we almost wonder if some of that was just the novelty of it being a planeswalker.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to turn your Jeweled Lotus into a Pyroclasm? I mean, that's good enough for me. I think it's solidly going to be B tier, and probably not ever going to be better than B tier, but probably not going to be worse than B tier. Unless you're playing some sort of meme deck where you're trying to attack and use the 0.
Yeah.
But
I think this is an A tier. And the reason I think this is A tier is I think this makes aggro somewhat of a more realistic game plan than it was before this. I said this in our set review, and I'm going to say it again. You go turn 1 Sarah Ascendant, turn 2 this, you're swinging for 18 lifelink. That's really powerful. There are a lot of things that do hold this card back, but I think it has a lot of big advantages of being able to pick off your... I mean, it almost works like a time walk to some extent, right? So everybody puts out their dorks, and you play this, and you ping all the dorks, and all right, well, now we're right back to where we started from. Plus being able to just be the infinite outlet for damage, making your attackers better overall. I think she's a really solid commander.
So A tier, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, I think she's really solid.
Very cool. Interesting. We'll see what else ends up in A tier tonight, and then we'll reevaluate Jeska.
Yeah, maybe
circle back around to the girl here.
All right.
See what else gets alongside old Jeska.
So the next one is the bestest little boy is Rograkh, son of I don't even know how to say the second one. Rohgahh.
Rohgahh is what I would
Rohgahh.
say. Yep.
Let's just call him Roger. Pongo, what is Roger in your tier list?
So let me start off by saying that, first of all, he's a warrior. He's got 3 incredibly relevant keywords. He's got a point of toughness, and he costs 0 mana, which means that he's essentially infinite value. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm completely pogged on Rog, and he's going straight into the S tier for me.
He's going straight into Najeela, right?
I mean, listen, someone has asked me that in all sincerity, whether or not he gets into Najeela.
Oh.
And, at first I said, well, no, because he's just going to attack and die. But then I saw that he has Menace, which means that, of course he gets into Najeela.
he does actually make you kill someone a turn faster.
In all seriousness, so the optimal time to play Roger in Najeela would be on turn 1. And beyond that, he kind of starts to lose some value. You can make a case for him on turn 2 being okay, but he still kind of costs a card in your hand. I don't know that Najeela necessarily needs that beyond turn 1, where again you would get that a little bit of acceleration towards a turn 3 win. So I wouldn't play him in the typical Najeela build, but there may be a build of Najeela that wants him, one that's aiming to try to go a little bit faster.
Okay. So Phoenix, where are you at on Roger?
We play cEDH, which means that we play every free spell we can get. This is a free card.
Yeah.
So there's no way it could be better.
Infinite value.
Yeah, exactly.
Infinite value, he says. The sky is not even the limit on the value of Roger.
So obviously it's S tier.
It's a 0
S
drop.
tier.
You don't have to pay any mana, so the value is infinite.
It is really bananas with the free, if you control your commander spells.
Oh yeah, completely seriously being able to cast Deflecting Swat on turn 1 is gross.
Yeah.
Consistently.
That's legit.
I honestly agree with all of these takes. I don't really the thing for me with that card is what makes it for me, and this is the biggest thing above everything else, is Enjoyer Weatherlight Captain. It's a historic spell that's a free cantrip. That's what matters.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That actually does. That makes sense, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Joyra is where on this list?
I mean, Joyra's S tier, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
Joyra didn't even make it.
Yeah,
on
she's not
to
even
the
here
list
to rank. She's
to
not
be
even here to
ranked.
rank tonight.
I know. Listen, Joyra is honestly one of my favorite commanders of all time. It's just hard to play. So, it is what it is. But yes, I will also put Roger as S tier. Ryan, where are you at?
I think that Roger is great. I love the design space. Hey, a 0-cost 1-drop. It's a Cabal. That's really cool. And basically kind of compounding what everyone else says. Free spells are always great.
Right.
Being able to get the Commander Matters type things in there is also fantastic. The Fierce Guardianships, the deflecting swats, and things like that. And also being able to add a red color identity as well to maybe a partner pairing that you didn't see. I like that idea and that concept. I don't know if it'll go in Najeela. I like my warriors to do more than just be menaced, like to just y'all be a 0-1 attacking.
He also has trample, Ryan.
You're right. I'll trample on you for 0. Gotcha, guys. Gotcha.
Got him.
Three incredibly relevant keywords.
Yes, I mean they're great keywords. Don't get me wrong, but there's the opportunity cost of the card, of course. We all know that. But no mana is really great. Those first drops, the ability to add a red color identity, I think those are cool. I think these definitely see themselves in. I see they're just being so open with its design space, meaning that there really is a lot of potential for really cool stuff to happen. We're already seeing some stuff being designed. It's being sent out there into the ether. And seeing some really cool stuff come out of it. S tier, that's a little ambitious, but maybe I'm being a little bit too realistic here. But no, I think it could end up in S tier. I think it might. And if not S tier, maybe B tier, because of all the different options that you have that comes with partners to begin with. So.
Okay, so you're a solid A tier.
Solid A between S and B. So I guess that is A. So,
all right. Next card up on our list is not from Commander Legends, but is from this year, from Ikoria. Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. So Phoenix, what is your impressions on Kinnan? Where does is it he? Where do they fall for you?
I don't know.
Pretty sure Keenan's
guy.
a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure on the lore.
I think according to the lore.
I haven't read, so every time you kill it, it comes back. It's annoying. I do honestly think that the card is very, very good. It is very consistent out of the command zone, and it's in 2 of the best colors in EDH. I think it is solidly B tier.
Okay. For me, I think I wish there was like a C+, because I don't feel like it's quite B tier and I don't feel like it's quite C tier. Just because, like, if I was going to just do blue-green, I just feel like I'd almost rather play just only Thrasios. But that's just me being a Thrasios stan, I guess. I don't know. I like Kinnan, and I think Keenan's really good. I'm just not as high on it as everybody else. I will say this. I've played Kinnan in Brawl a lot, and it's bananas in Brawl.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, I guess I'll put it in B tier. Ryan, what do you think?
I definitely think it belongs in B.
Okay.
Best colors, super aggressive cost, amazing ability the moment it comes down. So, turn 1, play a dork or a bird. Turn 2, play him, and then immediately have 2 mana to work with. Just so many good things. Infinite mana sink right from the command zone as well. Yes, it's got colors, but when you're in infinite mana, that really doesn't matter at that point, because it's infinite. And basically just slam every single one of your non-humans onto the battlefield. That's pretty good. So it's got just about everything you could want in a cEDH commander. Good colors, aggressive cost, infinite mana sink, mana advantage. It's got the whole package. Definitely a B tier. The only reason it's not in A tier, in my opinion, is just because it's just not in more colors. We got a lot of really great cards with a lot of that are colors just outside of this. So That's the only thing keeping it out of A. Is just I wish it was in more colors. That's
If it
all.
had partner, it would be an S tier.
Oh yeah, completely.
Like,
Yeah,
it would be
game
bananas.
changer. Yeah.
Pongo, where are you at with Kinnan?
Well, I'm sure most of you will know that Kinnan's kind of my boy. So I'm going to say that if you're playing my exact 99, then definitely S tier. And if you deviate by even one card, then straight to F tier.
F tier, all or nothing.
So somewhere in between, I guess. We're just going to take the average, and we'll say, the average person's Kinnan deck, if they're not going straight from the deck list database, probably about a B.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Next up on the list, we're back to Commander Legends with this one, is Krark the Thumbless. And this card is a card. So one of the things with this card, so you do the instant sorcery flip thing or not, is there's weird things you can do with Flusterstorm. There's weird things you can do with the free spells. All of those things. It's just really, really good. The problem is I feel like it's kind of a meme, right? Like, it's good, but is it going to be like what are you, if you pair this with like Silas, is this going to overtake, some of the Roger Silas decks or the Kess decks or those sorts of things in Grixis, which, by the way, Grixis' stocks just went way, way up all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. But I really think that it's like a solid, like, B tier commander. Like, on its own, like, I don't feel like it's, it's good. It's not amazing. In the right colors, it could be really, 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 really good. But I feel like compared to the other stuff that's in that space, it's kind of the meme of everything. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Ryan, what do you think?
To put this in a C tier would be generous to me. Okay. I think this belongs in D. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever had a bad night with Mana Crypt and losing every flip. But, he introduces a lot of coin flipping, which people, that's cute. And what, like you said, we're kind of evaluating based upon a floor or a ceiling here. Well, yeah, oh man, I'll Flusterstorm you. Gotcha. Be like, okay, but what about when you're losing all your other flips and all your spells are returning to your hand? It means you got to recast them. It means you got, maybe you get a cast trigger on something. So you're building a lot around this guy just to get a general payoff. And the payoff is copying a spell. That's not super great, I like the partner, and if you're really, really focusing hard on him to build around, you're going to get some advantage. But there's going to be nights when you're just going to lose a lot of flips. And that's a real feel bad. To basically say, well, I entered in and I lost tonight because I just couldn't get my coin flips right. So I don't think he's got longevity. I think he's got a little bit of a meminess to him. Yeah. I think he's cute. I think it's a neat design space, but I think he probably belongs in more of a D tier at the end of the day.
So 2 thumbs down on Krark the Thumbless from Ryan.
2 non-thumbs down. 2 Krark's thumb down.
2 stubs. All right, Pongo, what do you think?
Well, I think it would only be fitting for me to flip a coin. If it's heads, I give him S tier, and if it's tails, I give him F tier.
All right, do it. Go for it.
All right, here we go. I'm going to look up randomizer online.
Oh, so you're taking the super long way around? Just flip a coin.
Yeah.
I don't have a coin handy.
Yeah. Oh, what is this? 2020? No one has a coin?
Yes, exactly.
It came up tails. You got lightning bolted.
Oh, tails.
Yeah,
I think I had said that's F tier, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry, guys.
I mean, listen, that's you live by the coin, you die by the coin.
That's what Krark says.
Cobblepot would be so disappointed in you, Pongo.
I didn't decide anything. Harvey Dent decided.
All right, Phoenix, what are you thinking?
So my question is, do I have to call an outside judge when I fail to flip 30 times in a row when I'm casting a free spell in our games? I can't wait for the situation where I'm casting Deflecting Swat and it goes back to my hand and I try and cast it again and I just keep losing.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
to be fair, I've seen you die to your crypt.
Well, yeah, that means I lose all my flips.
Yeah.
So I just can't wait to see. I do think it is solidly D tier. I think that the randomness of it pushes it a little bit out of the consistency needed for a not meme deck, but I can't wait to fail flips over and over again and never actually resolve a spell.
Yeah, am I over-evaluating this card?
Well,
I'm like, all three of you are like, this is terrible, and I'm just like, oh, shoot.
I mean, I think the optimist in you really wants it to be higher.
I mean, I play Lavinia, right? So
there's that's the eternal optimist in you there. To kind of compound what Phoenix said there. It's I think that those types of really cool interactions was what I think people are inflating this card for. I'd love to recast Deflecting Swat over and over and over again and lose my flips and eventually get it. That's a really cool thing that happens, but how often is that going to happen at the end of the day? So
yeah, putting my role as the comedic relief aside for a second, I said it previously that Krark is probably the coolest commander in the format and probably the most fun deck you could build. So if I'm rating him in earnest, it's much higher than than the joke that I made previously, because I do think that the deck is super sweet.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know, Phoenix, you were brewing like a Jeska, like Dovescape one with that card.
Yeah. You get the hand. If you lose the flip, you get the card back on Dovescape, and if you win, you actually cast the spell. It seems bad, but we'll see.
That's awesome.
So
that's actually a really cool interaction. I love that.
I want to play Chalice of the Void and then actually get to cast my spells.
Love it.
All right, so on to our next one. Is going to be Lavinia Azorius Renegade, which is my baby. So Ryan, be gentle. What do you think of Lavinia?
Oh, are you going to go last on Lavinia? You're going to hear our opinions first?
Well, I went first on Krark. We've gone around the table, man.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so Lavinia, love her aggressive cost. Her colors, I like blue. I gotta be gentle. Okay, I gotta really pick my words here. Maybe something somewhat anecdotal will help with this. I never see people win games with Lavinia. She always just peters out. So, actually, it's all right. So, in all seriousness, I love her ability. Her ability is perfect, along with her cost. 2-drop, and then start to really choke people right away. I think that's amazing. If you can get her out turn 1, it's even better. I really like that. Her colors are very limited. Not a whole lot of real easy win cons in her colors, unfortunately. So you're kind of you're a little bit pigeonholed with her color pie, and it is it's not an open-ended commander. It's definitely like you're gonna build this one way kind of commander. Right. I'm gonna put her in the C tier.
Okay.
So I'm gonna put her in C. Like I said, I love her cost and I love her ability. And those who want to build that way, she's just the perfect commander for it. It's like you take one look at her and you're like, I'm in love. When you love those types of things. So I'd put her in C. Okay.
Pongo, what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking back on a conversation we had, I think, last night, where
I'm sure you are.
we were talking about the deck, and I had mentioned, like, why aren't you playing Fabricate or just, like, some of the other artifact tutors? And you said, oh, well, because when we get our win condition, we don't win typically. Like, we don't actually ever want to get our win condition. We kind of
immediately.
we kind of just like hope to get there at some point. So to me, that was pretty damning. Beyond that,
going to wreck Derevi so hard.
I agree with a lot of Ryan's points. Lavinia is quite a strong card herself. When you play her in a better deck, then she's a pretty good card, and her stocks have certainly gone up recently. But heading her own deck, unfortunately, it's gonna have to be an E for me.
E tier.
Ooh, E tier.
You know what's really embarrassing about this being our next episode is that the episode right after is literally Phoenix and I doing a Lavinia deck update.
I can't wait.
We're doing great advertising for this list right now.
All
right,
let's
so
talk about the hottest E-tier commander, guys.
Still on the database, all right?
Yeah.
All right, Phoenix.
So,
You and I run that list. What do you think?
I don't know if any of you played the version 1 list before
It was
we did a big
bad.
overhaul. But
That's what I have most of my exposure to is version
Okay.
1 list.
there was a point in time where I copy pasted the Grand Arbiter list and then played it with Lavinia as the commander, and I was like, this is way better. And we started from that point, and that's where version 2 is from. In all seriousness, Lavinia is really good against fast decks. It is really bad against Najeela and Pako, which I love to play, so Callahan doesn't win very many games.
When you don't play, I win a lot. But as soon as you sit down and you're like, oh, I'm going to play, like, the games that you play, like, Kenrith stacks, I'll, like, end up winning those games. But, like, the games where it's like, oh, I'm playing Najeela, I'm like, fuck.
That reaction right there is exactly why I think it is an E-tier deck. Sometimes it can be really good in your meta, and it's definitely a fun deck to have in your meta every once in a while.
Okay. Well, I'm going to bring the average up. Lavinia is an S-tier commander.
You are entitled to your opinion.
I'm supposed to be the comedic relief.
Oh, I am overselling. If I were to be completely honest with you, in my honest opinion, and not my fanboy opinion, would be it's a B-tier commander. I still think higher of it than you guys do. Mostly because of the fact, so the new list has a lot of new ways to break parity, and you're going to see that in the upcoming video. There's stuff like Urza in the 99 now. It's a lot easier now, especially with the MDFCs, to gain advantage, like, out of nowhere. And, like, Reoccurring Insight is one of those cards where it's like, if you resolve that spell, you're just going to win the game. But, I mean, her ability is really good, and especially with... So if you're in an Najeela meta, and I've kind of said this in our Discord a lot, if you're in an Najeela meta, it is not a great list to run, because you are just going to get beat up on. However, if you are in some of these turbo farm metas, where it's all this fast mana, we're jamming stuff out, we're maybe playing 1 or 2 lands, Lavinia is great. Because Lavinia is going to walk in and, depending on where the die roll goes, which is also part of why she would be a lower tier, not a top tier commander, truthfully, is that when you land her on turn 1, which the deck is trying to do every game, those turbo farm lists that are trying to get like turn 1 or 2 ad nauseums are just halted immediately. So it's very good in that regard, and then you're also just playing blue, and because it's effectively a mono blue deck with some white splashed in. So I mean, it just has a lot of really good ways to do things, and she's also awesome, and she's amazing, and I love her to death.
All valid points.
So I do remember, though, because I used to play Grand Arbiter, when she did get spoiled, I did immediately go, this is just strictly better than Grand Arbiter, in my opinion. Because and it's interesting because with Lavinia, and I'm going to stop after this, is you kind of play it the anti-taxing way, because, like, you don't want to tax things because then it goes against the effect of the card. So instead, there was one point, this was kind of a meme, but we did play Helm of Awakening, because you could, like, pick off people's soul rings and stuff like that. It was kind of hilarious. So up next is Thrasios. I'm done fangirling. Up next is Thrasios. And Pongo, what is your opinion on Thrasios?
So if you had asked me, maybe like a bit over a year ago, I absolutely would have said S tier. Because, Thrasios was widely considered to be kind of like the menace. If you're following sort of cEDH discussions now, if you're on cEDH, in the cEDH Twitter sphere, there's a lot of people who are basically asking the question, is Thrasios even good anymore? not to name any names, but like some people going on Twitter are basically saying Thrasios is just not good at all anymore. We pretty much need to be looking to Chrom and Tymna instead as like the best deck in the format. So for me, given all of that and given the fact that it seems like green just isn't really that good in Commander anymore, I'm going to have to go ahead and say that Thrasios is no longer S tier, but maybe like B tier.
All right. B tier. Okay. Phoenix, do you have a rebuttal for that?
I think Thrasios is just too boring. People get tired of playing Thrasios because he is so good. He's definitely S tier, not memeing. But I think that he is actually so good that people will get tired of playing him and think that he is not as good because they haven't played him. Because all Thrasios decks are really good.
It's very true. And
that's pretty much all I got. It's Thrasios.
Yeah, I mean, it's
He's
Thrasios.
insane.
It's self-explanatory. So, S tier, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Obviously, Thrasios is S tier. The first cEDH deck I ever built was Thrasios, Vile Smasher, Paradox Storm, and would rip that deck. But it was what got me into this format, and an infinite mana outlet in the command zone. Because when I first saw it, when I was playing casual, I was like, okay, whatever. And then I started playing some competitive games, and I was like, holy crap, this is insane. So, yeah, it's certainly S tier. And, Brian, I'm sure you're going to put this in F tier, right?
So, basically, he is the commander for which all other commanders are measured.
Mm-hmm.
He basically, I'm thinking about toying with this and that partner or this and that commander. And he's always the yardstick in which you measure. Well, is that as good as Thrasios? I mean, wouldn't you rather just have Thrasios in the command zone? He's got absolutely everything you could possibly want from a commander in the command zone. But great colors, infinite mana sink, colorless mana, infinite mana sink, ramp and card draw. I mean, I can't imagine anything else you could possibly want from your commander. And the super aggressive cost. You're gonna kill it. That's fine. I'll just literally cast it next turn.
Right.
I would be super harsh to even put it in A tier. Unfortunately, I think it's still S tier, and I agree with people when they say it's just, I think everyone's gotten really bored of him because he's just so good and so consistent. And so people are toying with other things and really liking the interactions that come with it is really what it's boiling down to. I still think he belongs in S tier.
Okay. Up next is a deck that we've seen a lot in our local meta, Phoenix, is Animar, Soul of Elements. What is your opinion on Animar? Be careful, Phil might be listening.
Phil, I love you, but I think Animar lacks the best color in cEDH at the moment, and it is black. It does have a protection from it, but I don't think that matters. I think that Animar is a little bit too dependent on casting a turn 1 or 2 Animar to be up in that S or A tier. I think it is very, very consistent and very good, and I think it lands in B, but...
Okay.
Also, creatures only is not a choice.
Yeah. I liked Animar as a B tier commander for a long time. And then I played against Pako and Haldan, which is like a very similar game plan, but also gets to just play better spells. And I was like, oh, I like that more. So I think it's now, honestly, a C tier commander, personally. Ryan, what do you think?
I'm pretty much in the same camp. Temur is good colors. Unfortunately, having to lean real heavy into the creature strategy to get benefit, having to put what would be almost considered otherwise dead cards to try and get Animar out faster, that doesn't lend itself right now in this meta with text becoming so tuned. And so I think that he was in B tier for a long time. I think he's getting bumped down to C now, though.
Okay.
We just have better Temur out there right now.
Yeah. Pongo, where you at?
Well, the way I look at it is when you play cEDH in paper especially, really, you just want to take as many opportunities to flex as you possibly can. And most of the time for us, that means playing like completely foiled out decks, for example. The corollary to that is that what kind of decks flex best? It's decks that play a lot of permanents, because if you're playing a bunch of instants and sorceries, those cards go straight to the graveyard, and then they get stacked on top of each other, so nobody sees them ever again. So Animar, because he plays to the board so much, and he plays so many permanents, sometimes up to 40 plus creatures, clearly S tier, because you get to put all those shiny creatures out, you get to blind your opponents, you get to swing in with value, not just like card value, but like monetary value. Like, these are all the things we want to be doing in cEDH. So I think, again, solidly S tier.
Shaper would be so proud of you. always loving his Animar. So.
Oh, the next one is perfect. I'm so happy this one has come to me. This is a wonderful coincidence. So the next one on our list is Derevi Empyrial Tactician. This is a terrible card. This is a really bad card. It's only good as a combo piece and like a deck nobody plays, right? Nobody cares about that deck. And I mean, listen, it can't break parity with what's it called? With, why am I blinking all of a sudden? Phoenix, you know what I'm talking about. Stasis. It can't break stasis locks. This is something that Derevi can't do. So this is very solidly an F tier commander for me. Ryan, where are you at?
All right, so Derevi Derevi was good for a long time. Right now, we're just getting into a world. Derevi was from 2013, so Derevi has that history behind him, but there's just been so many better things that have come out since then that he just not necessarily by not getting better, but just staying where he is, he's just been bumped down in favor of better strategies over time. I've always been a big fan of Derevi, but at the end of the day, I think he probably belongs in a C tier. Not because he's not good, it's just because there are just so many better ones out there now that there just didn't used to be. He just keeps getting supplanted over and over again. And so I think he probably belongs in a C now. And that makes me a little sad, because I love Derevi. I played during those days, so...
Yeah. Phoenix, what are your thoughts on Derevi?
Yeah, I think we as a community need to come together and go back to our roots. So now that Flash is gone, we need to call for the banning of Derevi.
Derevi.
The ability breaks the purpose of the format of Commander.
Yeah.
It avoids the command tax forever.
That's true.
Yeah. And it's activated ability, so you get around cast. There's, like I said, he was never bad, but...
I do actually think it is bumped down into the C tier, and I hate to see it, but I think that we do need to unite in our front of calling for Derevi bans. Hashtag ban Derevi.
Ban Derevi.
On to the next one.
Excuse me? All I have to say is, down here, salt is a way of life. Obviously, the environment down here is all salt. The ceiling is salt, the floor is salt, the walls are salt, and to an extent, the air is salt. And you breathe that in, and you constantly taste the salt. So, this applies to Callahan, who's obviously salty about Lavinia, but it also applies to my opponents when I play Derevi. You get down a couple of stacks pieces, and people just essentially want to stop playing the game. They don't even care that you beat them eventually. So, for a long time, I played the deck without any win conditions, because who cares? People just stop playing. And then you get to drink their delicious salty tears. And yeah, so solidly, I understand I'm a little biased. So I would say, while the deck is very clearly S tier, I don't want to give off any kind of like image of impropriety or bias or anything like that. So we're going A. Just to be fair. Because I listened to you guys, and I understand you raised some good points, but I think I raised better points.
We appreciate the professionalism that Pongo displayed this evening.
No, I really appreciate it. And In all seriousness, Derevi, because I remember at one point you were talking about how like stasis came out of that, right?
I don't run stasis in that deck anymore, actually.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I remember hearing something about how it was like we can't really effectively break parity with stasis.
So, yeah, a lot of people still do run stasis in that deck, and you obviously run a few additional cards that you combo with Derevi to break parity. It doesn't take a whole lot with Derevi and stasis to break parity on it, but it does take a third piece to maintain it forever. I personally found that a lot of those cards that you were running to do that were just not quite as good as they needed to be in the current era of cEDH. So I said, okay, well, I'm running cards that are not good enough, in my opinion, in the deck to maintain stasis, and going even beyond that, people just need to play a couple of lands and land their dockside, and typically they can win from there even through your stasis. So it's the type of situation where going for those hard locks is just not nearly as tenable as it used to be. And so you typically want to be moving into a direction where you can actually tempo people out and then literally close out the game with an actual combo finish, which, as I was saying before, back in the day, 3-4 years ago at this point, you could get away with not necessarily having to do that.
Okay. So, I was fair. I gave you time to talk about your card. Okay. I was fair. So don't ever say I'm not fair. So next up, this one's going to go to Ryan, is Pako and Haldan. Ryan, what's your impression of this deck?
I've never been in love with Pako and Haldan. I love the design space of it and stuff like that. Pako and Haldan came out. I have to admit a certain degree of bias here. Like I said, Temur is good colors. And Pako and Haldan is in a really cool design space. And I've seen some of the things it can do, which is really nice. I have certain biases because I was exposed to Pako and Haldan in a webcam world. World being what it is now and stuff like that. And I found myself frustrated with kind of how Pako and Haldan always had to play out in a webcam world. So it always kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. And I know that's my biases coming through. And so whenever I see a Pako and Haldan deck at the table, I'm like, oh, where's my marker? Or where, I hope that guy's got a lot of infinite tokens around or whatever. And so I've always got to be, dealing with that kind of stuff. As far as a actual, competitive deck, trying to look at it as objectively as possible, I would probably put it in a. It's tough for me because I would probably end up putting it in a C tier. Okay. I know that there's some metas where it really surprised people, which is really cool and stuff like that, but I've never seen it really go over the top. I don't see it in Final Fours of tournaments and stuff like that, or even hardly in top 16s. And I do let that kind of influence my biases a little bit. So I am willing to say that it's a good deck. It is. It can do things, and sometimes it doesn't do things. You shut down the commanders too many times, or you find a way around it with something like a Draneth or something. You're in a tough spot sometimes, because Pako and Haldan does go a little bit more into the commander strategy. And I'm willing to put it at a C. Not the best out there, but definitely not the worst out there. It's no Derevi. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so C is where I'd put it. So,
Pongo, where you got it?
So I think really the only thing better than Pako and Haldan are the people who play Pako and Haldan. I've never met a group of people who are so passionate about their deck, to the point where I'm afraid to even mention the words Pako and Haldan, because if I bring it up ever, they're just going to start talking about it nonstop. They're going to start shilling that deck like crazy. So surely they're onto something, because how could they not be if they love the deck that much? So, taking all that into account, taking into account the fact that Pako is pretty clearly a good boy, I'm gonna say that it's solidly a B tier deck.
But Pako on his own is an S tier card, right?
Pako on his own is S tier. Yeah, Haldan really drags him down quite a bit.
Pako is a good boy.
Yes, very much so.
So Phoenix, you've been playing a lot of Pako and Haldan recently, and really have been pushing Braden to do some new things. So what are your thoughts on Pako and Haldan?
You know, my favorite thing to do when I sit down to play a game of Magic is to play with all of my opponent's decks and not my own. So I just love that they printed Opposition Agent, and the only thing that could make this deck better is printing Opposition Agent in blue.
Oof.
It's all that really needs to be done.
How are you putting that Opposition Agent into play, though? You may play non-creature cards from exile.
Oh, no, I'm saying Wizards should just make another Opposition Agent for specifically Pako and Haldan.
That's fair. And make it a non-creature spell, like an enchantment or something.
Yeah, so I can specifically get it from other people's decks as well. Yeah.
Yeah, fair. No, I agree. That makes sense.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, I sit down with a pile of mana rocks and you guys play decks, and then I play your decks and I win. That's the game plan.
WotC design team, take note. We'll send it up the pipe.
Oh yeah, I do think the deck is actually a B tier deck. It does run into the issue of playing a bunch of mana and just having nothing to use the mana on sometimes. But
yeah, I'm kind of with Phoenix and Pongo on that. I didn't really think much of it before. I really played against it a bunch, and then I played against it a bunch, and I was like, okay, so this deck has wields. Like I said when I was talking about Animar, I think Haldan and Pako are just doing the same strategy but better, and more effectively. Whether or not that strategy is worth pursuing is its own, conversation. I think it is good, and to Brian's point, it never shows up in these top 16s. And I wonder, part of what I wonder about that is how many people are playing it to begin with, because it is kind of a fringe deck to begin with. So my question would be, is it not showing up there because it's not good, or is it not showing up there because not as many people play it in those tournaments? And that would be my question. And there's really no way to answer that. But I do think this is a B tier commander. I think Pako and Haldan, especially that deck and the deck that has come out of it, is really good, and I think it's incredibly underrated. I think more people should be playing it. On to the next card is Heliod Suncrowned, recently off a win at Oktoberfest. Did I say that right? Oktoberfest?
Oktoberfest.
It's like some of the spellings were Oktoberfest, like Oko.
Right.
Yeah. And some of them just ended up being Oktoberfest. They just spelled it like Oktoberfest. So there was an inconsistency in messaging there.
Yeah, so, I was never sure. Well, Michael Levine piloted this very successfully to a cEDH tournament win recently. So Pongo, what is your take on this?
Did he win, or did he just get in the top 4?
He top 4'd. He didn't.
Yeah,
win.
I thought he won.
There was one where he won before, earlier in the year.
Right.
But not this one. But I mean, top 4 still.
My thoughts on this card are, unless you are literally Michael V. Levine, garbage. You cannot play this deck. But if you are Michael V. Levine and you play this deck, S tier. So, yeah, another dichotomy.
So, you're saying what then?
I'm saying probably.
Give me a letter.
Let's go with the letter somewhere. I guess we'll take the average of the two, and we'll say a D. We'll say D.
Okay.
But solidly S if you're Michael V. Levine.
Fair enough. Phoenix, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I think the commander is actually maybe an E tier commander, but Michael playing the deck makes it an S tier deck.
So is that also D?
E.
Okay. E? Okay.
Yes.
For me, I kind of agree with everybody on that. Like, it's good. It's good enough for mono white to be in the ballpark. But I think it's an E. I think we've talked about this. We've seen Jin talk about it on Twitter. We've seen everybody talk about it. Mono, just white is bad, right? and it needs a lot of help. And Heliod is good, but it's not great. So, Ryan, what's your take?
Same thing, basically. I love where they're going with white and stuff like that, and they're acknowledging that we need to do some things to help white out. And I think that there's a really cool thing to have half of a combo in the command zone, but at the end of the day, it's not there yet. And like you said, unless it's the absolute best pilots for the job, it's just not great. I think that's the only reason anybody would bump it up from F. It's in the worst color. You have to play so many suboptimal cards just to create any sort of consistency out of this thing. And that's not what you want from a cEDH deck. Right. And so if it weren't for the fact that if it's piloted, so if you basically quadruple down on your devotion to that deck, no pun intended, you can maybe end up in a Final Four. And I don't mean to disrespect mono white. I know that there's a lot of great mono white pilots out there. I know there can be a lot of strength in mono white, but I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the numbers really kind of do speak for themselves. Usually you don't see the whole place isn't, whenever you see a tournament, it's not flooded with mono white and one guy bubbled to the top. It was one guy who took mono white and no one respected mono white at the table. And a lot of times they ran away with the game because of it. Or they were able to leverage certain strategies and things like that. Not taking away anybody's victories or anybody's hard fought wins or anything like that. But I would definitely put this at E tier. E tier all the way.
All right. Up next is Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator. He's from the new set. And Phoenix, what do you think of this guy?
Yeah, I think Malcolm reminds me a lot of Heliod, which we just talked about. It is almost the same card when it comes to just being a one-card combo and doing something on attacking, except for it's blue, and it has partner, and it has flying, and is a pirate, which is way cooler than Heliod being a god. Yeah, I do actually think Malcolm is probably solidly, depending on the partner, somewhere in the C to B tier. Having a one-card combo is great, but only being one color doesn't make you quite as good as Tymna.
If you're in red specifically, right?
Yeah, and so I'm talking about Glinthorn Buccaneer, which I think was mentioned on the set review that you guys did.
Yeah,
which is a one-card combo with this out of the command zone.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I think it's C. I think that it has some merit outside of red, but I don't think it is a slam dunk. I think that it is a very, very average commander coming out, but it's still good. It is still solid, but it is outside of red a solid C tier. I would say if you're putting it in red, I would bump it up to B tier. Ryan, what do you think?
I think this actually belongs in D. I think it's cute is really the first thing I always say when I describe this card. It's cute. It's got that one card combo in there, but it means that you are already limiting yourself to something with X red in it. So Vial Smasher, Breaches, things like that. And that's not to say a combo in the command zone is not a good thing, but Heliod does that too. It bumps itself up from an E because it's blue. Blue's pretty much best color in this format. It really is. And some would argue a couple others, but let's face it, it's up there. Semantics aside. So that does bump it up from an E tier card combo in the command zone. But is it really doing anything besides that? Being the
Not
other
really.
half of your combo? Other than being blue? Not really. Or at least not that I can see yet. I know it hasn't been out that long. So I would probably put this in a D tier.
Okay. D tier. Pongo, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm a little confused about this card, to be completely honest with you, because my understanding is that sirens normally lure pirates and sailors by singing, and they get them to shipwreck themselves. So why in the world would you be a siren pirate? That makes very little sense to me, because those two things seem kind of antithetical from that perspective. So this is definitely going to be like an F for me, just a fail on the flavor front. I don't know.
Okay.
Doesn't make much sense.
Solid. Next card up is Najeela. I swear I didn't plan it this way. I'm not going to dunk on this. I already got the dunk on Pongo. Najeela, I feel like I don't know really how much you could say about Najeela that hasn't already been said. Najeela is a solid S tier, in my opinion. The card doesn't get much better than Najeela, in my opinion. If you want to play an aggressive strategy that also has interaction and can do things, Najeela's the way to go. Not taking anything away from Godo and other things that are aggressive and do things like that, but this is a deck that is not a glass cannon and could play aggressively. I love Najeela. It's a great deck. I don't play it personally because it's not the way that I want to be playing, but Najeela's awesome. Ryan, where are you at?
Exactly the same place. Best colors, because it's all of them. You have basically your choice of literally any card in the format. Inevitability built right into the command zone. You don't even need an infinite combo to win. You can just use critical mass and win.
Right.
If you can just turn sideways enough, you can win. You don't even need to seek out your combo win con. She just makes it better with all the combos that you could put. And they're all one card combos. You know, you've got Derevi, which I think we said was like an F tier or something like that. It only made better because of Najeela affiliations. But
correct.
I mean, so you have all these, like, you could basically slot in all these one card, combo pieces in with Najeela that just makes her even better than she already is on her own. Aggressively costed, turn sideways. You can put all kinds of, great interaction in with her. Just like you said, there's just not really much else you could ask for from a commander. Right. So S tier, 100%. Okay.
Pongo, what do you think of Najeela?
Solid S tier. I mean, I agree with everything everyone said so far. Yeah, I mean, not only is the deck fantastic, again, one card win conditions, tons of inevitability in the command zone, access to all 5 colors. It's just super cool to be able to play on that axis of, attacking people and caring about that part of the game. So yeah, just all awesome. Good for me.
Phoenix?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing better than playing with other people's decks for me is playing the best deck, and Najeela is the best deck.
Awesome. All right, so next up is Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Ryan, what do you think of it?
C. Mono green. So your options are limited, and the mono green win cons and cEDH have been pretty well figured out. At this point, Selvala is cool because she can be that infinite mana sink and that card draw engine, which is what you want in cEDH. But just being in mono green really limits you in some of the things that you want to have to really be a force at the table. Right. So not a whole lot of stack interaction going on, which is a bummer because Thoracle wins kind of on the stack. Triggered abilities, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of times Selvala is just sitting there helpless. I like the combo, but like I said, all the combos have been pretty much figured out in green. So kind of a one-trick pony. If you don't like to do the exact same thing every single game with a set of about 5 cards, this Selvala is really not going to be for you because you really are just seeking to kind of do the same thing with a kind of, you can maybe slot out A or B card for one or the other, but it's really kind of just doing the same thing. Right. C tier, because it can combo off very quickly. So it is definitely one of those things like saying, okay, guys, we got to stop what we're doing, and we need to deal with Selvala before the next turn, because she could absolutely win on her next turn. So there is that to do, which is why she isn't ranked lower, in my opinion. But I think she belongs kind of in the C tier.
Okay. Pongo, what's your take?
So I think Selvala is pretty interesting in the sense that, for a very, very long time in cEDH meta, she was actually way more of a factor than she is these days. And right. It feels like a lot of people have kind of moved on from Selvala to a certain extent. It's the type of commander a lot of people will start with, and they tend to then subsequently move on to other commanders. So I do think that the deck is very strong naturally, and I think that Wizards is certainly not shying away from printing good green cards. So we're getting new good green cards. Jeweled Lotus is a huge get for the deck as well, I think. So this is, to me, like a solid deck that probably ranks minimum a C, possibly a B. My one concern is that I think it's almost guaranteed at this point that Sheldon's going to ban this card because it's basically Raphaelos, right? Like, it's just a matter of time. So I don't know. I will say C because this card probably gets banned within the next couple of years.
Fair enough. Phoenix, where are you at?
Yeah, turn 2 Selvala, turn 2 Abrupt Decay, a tale as old as time.
Yep.
Selvala really struggles when you don't get the turn 2 Selvala around the table. And once you're behind, your deck has nothing to it. It will eventually try and win again, but it doesn't really keep going. And that's really my argument for C tier on Selvala.
Okay. We are unanimous here. I agree. This is C tier. I think this used to be A tier, maybe like 2, maybe 3 years ago. I remember when Selvala was really, 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 really good. But there's too many good decks anymore. On to the next one is Silas Renn, who I don't think we would have discussed maybe 4 weeks ago, but is now being discussed a lot. And what do you think of Silas, Pongo?
I mean, I look at Silas, and Silas looks at me, and I say, Silas, you're just there for the colors, buddy. I'm sorry. You're not actually anything really all that relevant. You give Roger blue and black, and that's pretty much your function. Obviously you can play him with like Krark and stuff like that too, but like he's mostly there as filling in the blanks, so to speak. So I don't think on his own he's really much to write home about. But what he lets you do with some of the other commanders in the format is quite strong. Because of that, I'm probably gonna have to rate him an E, just because I don't think realistically you want to play this card other than as, like I said, the supporting cast for another commander.
Right. Phoenix, where you at?
Yeah, I'm straight on board with that. Silas builds a robot, and the robot holds blue and black, and Silas exists. That's how I feel about Silas. I do think he's probably D tier. Sometimes it is relevant recasting an artifact every turn, but
okay.
It's not great.
I think Silas is F tier personally. I think, and the reason I think that, and I'm not doing that as a meme, I think as soon as we get another round of partners that are in, if we ever do, right? So in this theoretical world, they print more 2-colored partners. The moment another blue-black partner comes out that does anything slightly more relevant than Silas, everybody's going to move off it and move right onto the new thing. And he is literally there for colors. Ryan, where are you at?
Yeah, I definitely feel this way about because they're a ruthless stalker. I mean, Silas Renn, Seeker Adept. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's exactly, basically just reiterating what everyone said. Silas Renn is only there for colors. His ability is novel, but I mean, what he's getting paired with versus what you're trying to do, they're almost, I'm going to say they're somewhat at odds with each other. I don't think everyone's going to go in on an artifact strategy outside of just the ones you're playing anyway. So you're not really going to go deep on Silas. So I would put him at the E tiers, because that he's only there for colors, which isn't what we're really looking for in our cEDH commanders. But right now, this is kind of our options. This is kind of what we got. It's this or nothing. So Silas Renn, E tier, maybe F tier.
Okay. I think what pushes him out of F tier for me, the sole redeeming quality he has is, by being an artifact, he helps enable Metalcraft.
That is true.
Yeah, but that's really pushing it. we're really digging deep now. So,
yeah.
Yes. So my Mox Opal's a little bit better. So.
Yes. I guess by that logic, I need to play all the artifact lands. Then, right?
Your Ancient Den, things like that. Yeah.
Got there. So up next is Sisay Weatherlight Captain. Phoenix, what do you think of her?
Somebody plays an opposition agent, and then you stare at them and pick up your cards and leave the table, is what I think. I do think that she's currently F tier. I think that she is not even something that you want to play Jeweled Lotus and play out on turn 1. She doesn't really have a useful effect on the game until you can make every color.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I made a Weatherlight. I called it Weatherlight Consultation, and it was pretty good. It was really consistent, and I liked it a lot. And it would do things. It was able to do a lot of different things. But with Opposition Agent, it doesn't get to do those things anymore. So I think this is an E tier deck or card personally, just based on the fact that if you are at a table where black is not at the table, it gets better. So, Ryan, what do you think?
F tier, simply because I haven't seen a deck that wasn't trying to be cute. You know, I'm going to play competitive Planeswalkers. I'm going to play competitive this and competitive that, which is trying to pull out these random legendaries. And there's just not a whole lot of things that are kind of our defined patterns in cEDH or our defined win cons that involve a lot of legendaries that can be fetched with cEDH. Yeah, sure, I can get a Mox Opal. Great. I just spent 5 for a Mox Opal. You know, that's not great. And she's mediocre in her best of days and straight up just dead on her worst of days.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we're in a world now where we're just looking for so much out of our cards, and right now her restriction's just a little bit too much to really get anything of consistent beneficial value. So I'd probably end up in the F tier. Now, that's not to say that she's not capable of cEDH, but she is at the very, very bottom rung of the cEDH ladder.
To be fair, the first thing you get off of her is not Mox Opal, Ryan. You get Oath of Nissa.
Oh,
Come
what
on.
was that? Yeah, that's right. Silly me.
Pongo, what do you think?
I'm a little surprised because I'm gonna be the voice of dissent here, and I'm gonna obviously start off a little bit more serious before trailing off into a meme. But I feel like one thing you guys maybe aren't factoring in is most of her lines have actually been kind of like worked on and developed since like the early Oath of Nissa days. So now most of the time what people are doing is they're going for kind of like more of a Derevi Najeela type win condition. Which leads me to my next point. What I like about this deck is not so much the deck itself. One of my favorite people in the entire cEDH community is a devout player of this deck, Rebel.
Yep.
And so, I'm definitely going to factor that into my final score. I'm also factoring in the fact that this is like the only cEDH deck that I can think of where you actively may want to be playing a companion, which is also pretty neat. So I think, all these things taken together, subtracting away some of the obvious weaknesses that you guys did talk about, I'm going to have to say that this is like a D tier commander.
Okay.
And I know, I'm sorry, Rebel, but I'm trying here. I'm trying.
Up next, I've got Tymna, and I think we can all agree, right? And we can just agree on this and move on, and we can get to the good stuff. Tymna's awful. Tymna's an F tier. We don't even need to talk about Tymna, right? Tymna's the worst.
Hard pass.
Yeah, hard pass.
Easy F.
Yeah.
Easy F.
In all seriousness, though, Tymna's really good. When I was new to cEDH, I didn't get the logic behind Tymna. Because I was like, why would you play white? White's terrible. Play Vial Smasher, get red. Because I thought you only got it for the colors and you didn't do anything. And then I eventually got there. I was like, you draw just a ton of cards. Tymna's really good. Tymna's obviously actually S tier. Ryan, where are you at?
Same place for all the same reasons. We've already kind of discussed all of the things that benefits from Thrasios. And a lot of those kind of roll over into Tymna. Card advantage, pressure, using your life as a resource, or being able to recast consistently because of the aggressive mana cost. It's got basically, now she is a little bit more build around. Thracios can go in just about anything you want, any strategy he really can just go with. Tymna, you do require a little bit more of some build around stuff to make her really shine, but those build around restrictions aren't that big. It's creatures. It's like not many people don't want to play creatures. So I, even with that slight restriction that I'm putting on, it's still S tier. drawing 3 cards a turn extra, living the dream and hitting all each of your opponents and all this. It doesn't get better than that. So S tier for me.
Pongo?
So kind of an interesting anecdote about Tymna is when we were first getting spoiled the partner commanders, I think most of us here can probably appreciate that it was immediately obvious that Thracios was broken, and everyone immediately clued in on that fact. So everyone started building Thracios decks, but Tymna was kind of like an unknown quantity, and like the community at large didn't really realize immediately how absolutely bonkers this card is. So it was only like after actually playing these decks a little bit that people were like, this Tymna card is really good and a lot better than we gave it credit for. And that brings us all the way to the present day, where I think everyone recognizes that Tymna is utterly absurd. So yeah, Tymna, I can't even really meme too much about Tymna. Very, very clearly an S tier. And I think my hot take for Tymna is that, from my perspective, she might even be the stronger of the Thrasios Tymna pair. But that's a bit of a hot take we can discuss another time.
Yeah. Phoenix, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. Does anyone here think Tymna's better than Thracios?
I was curious.
Ryan brought up this in his blurb on Thrasios. It's the measuring stick that everything is put up against, and Tymna measures up pretty close. Mm-hmm. And that's an entire topic in and of itself.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on that.
Obviously, S tier.
All right, so next up on our list is, Ryan, you kind of dunked on this card a little bit earlier, is Kaiser, Ruthless Stalker, and Ukima, Stalking Shadow. And conveniently, Ryan, this card goes right to you first. What do you think about these two?
I think as far as the food chain commanders go, which is what these commanders are, I think they're good simply because of Ukima. The fact that you don't have to have another outlet after you've already assembled your food chain combo, like you might have to do with some other commanders that are in food chain, really does well. Because basically, okay, I've assembled food chain. Now I'm just going to win with my commander. I mean, you can't, So it's not like, I've got to set up something like a Mayhem Devil and then do this and then do that. So skipping that step is actually really good. I put Pako and Haldan, I believe, in the C tier earlier. And I think this partner pairing is actually a little bit better than them, just simply because it's cast from command zone and win. So I put this into a B tier.
Okay. Pongo, where are you at?
So my thoughts are that Food Chain isn't even the best enchantment-based win condition in the format anymore. And not having access to red is an enormous strike against these two. If we compare them to, let's say, the entirety of 5-color Food Chain, I'm not even entirely convinced that those decks are, like, strictly speaking, best served by being like pure Food Chain decks anymore. I think there's a lot of draw to Underworld Breach, and we might get into that a little bit later. So I don't actually think that Ukima and Kazur are necessarily that great. I do think that the win condition is strong enough that they will perform, and they're in great colors. So they're certainly, in the upper 50% of commanders. But no, from my perspective, I'm going to say that they are a C tier.
Okay. Phoenix, what do you think?
How many of you can tell me what Kazur does right now?
Am I allowed to look at my Mox field list in front of me?
Doesn't he make things grow or something?
Yeah, he puts +1/+1 counters on creatures.
Yeah.
Whenever creatures you control deal combat damage.
Just to continue hating on Kazur, there's another win condition that you can play in Kazur Ukima, and that's Alurin. You can't even cast Kazur off of Alurin.
Speaking of enchantments, that might be I can't even say that.
I feel
it's
like
very interesting that Ukima can combo with both Food Chain and Alurin, but I think that it is also what Pongo said, not a great enchantment win condition when compared to Underworld Breach, and I think this deck sits at a very solid C tier for me.
Okay. I like this list. The problem for me is it's not Sidisi and I love cEDH. And cEDH layered combo. I love that list. I used to play that with Gitrog. So when Flash was still legal, I played it with Flash Hulk in it. But instead of my like pile being like a normal Flash Hulk pile that you mill yourself out with or whatever, my pile was
Hermit Druid, right?
No, it was Gitrog and Putrid Imp. So you got both of those out at the same time. It was a little bit of a meme, but also like Gitrog and cEDH is bananas. So for me, I do think it's good, but I personally like cEDH more in those colors as for food chain and for layered combo. And I just think the fact that Kaiser is effectively a wasted card in the 100 really brings the stock of that down. And so I think it's a D tier deck. Up next is Vial Smasher the Fierce. And Pongo, what do you think of Vial Smasher?
So, another kind of placeholder type commander who's mostly there for the colors. Move over Vial Smasher. I think your days are somewhat numbered. Silas, Renn probably looking to take your spot to a large extent. So Vial Smasher actively contributes to a few different other strategies. Obviously pairing with like the aforementioned Malcolm for like those curiosity type combos. Historically paired with Thracios quite a bit in sort of more controlling shells, but now, you see a lot of Thracios Vial Smasher kind of like turbo-y style decks. Vial Smasher himself doesn't, or herself, I'm not entirely sure. Vial Smasher doesn't bring a whole lot to the table as a card as far as I'm concerned, other than colors. So I'm probably going to have to give this card, again, kind of like an E ranking, mostly because I think that's where I think I've settled on these commanders that are kind of placeholder color commanders.
Okay. Phoenix, what do you think?
I see someone hasn't died to a dig through time. Vial Smasher trigger.
Yeah.
We have.
More than once.
Well, you're dying to the die roll more than the dig through time, right?
Well, not if you're the last person left alive, but I do think that you bring up extremely valid points, and I think that the fact that Vial Smasher can win the game eventually does push it up to the D tier for me. But I don't think that it has very many redeeming qualities other than some cute interactions.
Okay. Well, I'm going to look weird because I think this is a B tier commander. Personally. Part of why that is, first of all, I thought for the longest time it was better than Tymna, and that's just me being dumb. But I do think that it is closer to the neighborhood of Tymna Thracios than it is to Silas, in my opinion. Yes, it is there largely for the colors. However, it is not a wasted card in your 99. There are a lot of strategies, specifically curiosity control, that even if a better black-red partner was printed, would not move off of Vial Smasher. And that, to me, makes it infinitely better than Silas Renn, obviously. But I think, like Phoenix says, I have lost to a dig through time on a Vial Smasher or other sorts of things. Like, Vial Smasher can just win the game, and that is something Tymna can't do. Tymna will be an engine to get you there, but Silas can't win, Tymna can't win. The only one that can say they can actually win the game is Thracios. And Vial Smasher and Thracios can just win the game. So I really like Vial Smasher. I think it's a B tier. Ryan, what do you think?
So I always like cards that benefit you in more ways by doing the things you'd be doing anyway. So when you have Vial Smasher on the battlefield, you're going to be casting spells regardless. So the fact that now I can cast a spell and get a damage trigger on top of it really helps. I ranked Malcolm earlier on higher simply because of its colors. And Vial Smasher is in some really good colors in our format right now.
Right.
Black and red are really, really strong. So I can't discount that those are really great additions to it. I don't rank this in an S tier like Tymna and Thrasios, but I am definitely steering more towards the B tier than I am the lower tiers, because Curious Control, I think, is really what sends it over the top for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not just adding Keen Sense or Curiosity onto Vial Smasher that makes them good. It's you know, just casting spells and getting that chip damage in and creating that inevitability is really good. And the fact that you can add these colors to things like Thrasios is also what makes it really good. So I'm going to put it in a B tier.
So I actually have a kind of a counter argument to the argument from Curiosities being played in Curiosity Control and sort of Vial Smasher actually doing something in that shell. So Callahan, you had previously said that, you know, these decks wouldn't move off of Vial Smasher if another red-black commander was printed, because they would obviously be doing the Curiosity Control thing. I think if that, you know, hypothetical red-black commander did something more relevant, like actively disrupted more or produced card advantage by himself or by itself, I think that these Curiosity Control decks would actually just move off of the Curiosities altogether, along with Vial Smasher.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. I still think Vial Smasher, and Ryan brings up a really good point. It just rewards you for playing the game, though, and that's why I just can't put it below, like the lowest I could possibly put it is C personally, but I just think it's really good, and it's in some of the best decks in the format. And I just can't put it below C, and really I just think it's a B tier card, honestly. And maybe that's me being biased from that being part of my very first deck that I ever played. And that's very, very much so a real possibility, because I have very clearly in this show been very unapologetic in my biases towards certain cards. But moving on to the next is we're going back to mono green, Yisan the Wanderer Bard, and we started with Pongo on the last one. So Phoenix, what do you think with this one?
Yeah, what did I put Selvala?
You put Selvala at a C tier.
This is D tier.
Okay.
I do think that there are relevant points to Yisan being able to be cast off of Mana Crypt, but I don't think that it is relevant anymore with Jeweled Lotus. I think that was the only thing keeping Yisan better than Selvala. Was that you could turn one Yisan much easier than you could Selvala.
Okay. I think it's C tier personally, just because of the fact that it is a card that, so it's about as close to a toolbox deck, like a creature toolbox deck, as you can really get in Commander, right? It's about as close as to those, because I used to play a lot of like Collected Company toolbox, those like Cord Company decks in Modern, and this is about as close to that as you can get in EDH, without actually playing like Company in those and making, which it does, obviously. It doesn't play Company, it plays Cord and that stuff. But I think it is a good, solid toolbox deck that in the right meta can be very disruptive and very good. Ryan, what do you think?
I used to play Yisan, and I loved Yisan. I had an almost entirely foiled out Yisan deck.
Oh, jeez.
So it was love affair of mine. Love that card. Love that commander. And the problem with Yisan is I have a tough time using things like Opposition Agent to say why a card isn't good. It's sometimes it's tough. I do understand the argument, you know, because I know the argument was made against Sisay earlier with that. And Opposition Agent is going to become a big thing, and that's going to make Yisan worse. It will. The thing about Yisan is that you see every move telegraphed a mile away. You know what their turn 1 through turn 6 is going to be, just by the pod composition before you've even started the game. And so you can plan for that accordingly. And having that sort of choreographed gameplay ahead of you means that you're going to have to try that much harder to work around it. And once again, it's in mono green, so you're limited. And so you have a lot of the same types of combo wins and stuff like that that come from things like Selvala. And just like there's the argument of, well, if you're playing this, why aren't you playing Thrasios? There can be arguments to be made that, well, if you're playing this, why aren't you just playing Selvala? And so it's kind of hard to distinguish that. They do play a little differently. One plays a control route, one plays a storm route. But at the end of the day, you're still kind of playing a lot of the same cards.
Right.
I would put Yisan, used to be higher, but he's more in the D tier now.
Okay.
So.
Pongo, where are you at?
So I liked your story, Ryan, about the fact that you used to play a lot of Yisan, used to have the deck fully foiled out and all of that, because I feel like everyone in this community used to play Yisan to some extent. Like everyone had Yisan built, and kind of just moonlit with Yisan a tiny bit. I don't know. I feel like Yisan and people who are really still into Yisan are kind of like clutching to like the last little remnant of like 2016, 2017 cEDH, those simpler days. And so I think if you would ask me like, where do you put Yisan? Where would you have put Yisan back then? Certainly a lot higher than I'd put it now. And even back then, I'm probably only putting it at like a C. So now I'm probably putting it at an E. I just think that it's a commander that, people, I haven't seen people playing much of it or pretty much like any of it recently. And every time I've seen it recently, it is lost.
I think that's very fair. Mm-hmm. I get all those points. I don't know. It's just, I think toolbox strategies still have some merit to them, even with opposition agent. And I just think the ability to, even though it's, and maybe I just played Yisan a little bit differently, I guess. I never played it in the what's the word? The linear way that a lot of people did. I always kind of played it as you pivoted onto different stuff. But I don't know. I think it's still solid. But
a lot of thing with Yisan was that it was turns 1 through 4 where you pivoted, or I guess maybe versus 1 through 4.
That's true.
Where you would always pivot, and then basically 5 up, it was always the exact same cards every time.
Next card on the list is Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. I have no idea where I rank this card personally. I know it's not F tier, and I know it's not S tier. I don't think it's A tier. If I was going to put it anywhere, it would probably be B tier, honestly. Just because for me, being in 2 colors, yes, you are in 2 of the best colors, but being in 2 colors is rough, even if you can just Thassa's Oracle Consultation and win. And because of the gameplay that it is, because of the words on the commander, you kind of pigeonhole yourself into playing some bad cards. And so for me, Yuriko is kind of a B tier deck in commander. What do you think, Ryan?
So yes, I mean in cEDH nobody's playing Draco to crack that 16 off the top, so sure, that's not happening, but I've seen a lot of really good stuff come out of Yuriko. So Yuriko, you play cards like Submerge and crack everybody for 5 and still have a free spell. That's pretty good. Dig Through Time, still good. Playing a couple of things that kind of use that invasion and stuff like that to try and get in there. The fact that it always avoids commander attacks is super strong. I mean, that's tough. So every time you remove it, it's got that inevitability of always coming back. So you always have to really kind of adjust your strategies around that. I've seen Yuriko win games in a sneaky farm. I've seen it win with Turbo Naws. So while it is in more limited colors, they're like the best colors in our format. So we still have a lot of really good options based around it. And so while you do have that, at the end of the day, they're still kind of doing that turn in sideways kind of strategy and kind of cracking off the top. There are some different routes that some people have taken, which has been nice. I would actually rank Yuriko at an A. Okay. Not an S tier. I agree with that. But I've seen some good stuff come from Yuriko multiple times, so I'd put it at an A.
Pongo, where are you at? What do you think?
So, Yuriko's all right as a commander. I think, though, that for me, the thing that really drags her down is that she serves as a reminder of just how underpowered and weak Commander 2018 was. That's, pretty much the only card from that set that I could really, remember, perhaps with, the exception of, Loyal Apprentice. And so that's a pretty bad sign to me. So I'm gonna have to dock her for that. As much as I probably shouldn't hold it against her specifically, I'm going to be petty like that, and I'm gonna say that she only makes it up to a B as a result.
Okay, Phoenix, what do you think?
Yeah,
I'm trying not to say where are you at all the time.
I feel like Yuriko is that deck that is one card away from being S tier no matter what strategy you're playing. But it won't ever be... There is never going to be that one card because you change strategies whenever you add new cards. And it just sits perpetually at A tier where it is great but not amazing.
Okay.
Drawing cards is wonderful. Doing damage is wonderful. Trying to do things quickly, it does that, but it doesn't always line up exactly with the way that it draws cards, and it's just this weird mismatch. But I do think it lands right in the A tier.
Okay. Next card, we've kind of talked a lot about some classic commanders and some more common commanders. We're coming back to Commander Legends now. I think we decided it was Arkelos Lagoon Mystic. Pongo, what are your thoughts? We've kind of discussed this a little bit, but where would you rate this as a commander?
I love the design of this card. I think it's probably my favorite design in that entire set, with the sole exception of the fact, and I'm going to get into this. I think we already talked about this, in fact, on one of our other episodes. The fact that Arkelos' abilities are both replacement effects as opposed to triggers. Mm-hmm. So you can't really get into that Amulet of Vigor type nonsense with him. You can't stack Amulet of Vigor, for example, on top of his abilities. Both of these things are to me kind of fails to a certain extent. That being said, I understand, for the sake of symmetry, they needed to do it this way. All that being said, he's still a pretty chill dude, likes to take things slow. I can appreciate that. I'm going to say, let's say B tier, just because, you can only go so wrong in Sultai colors, even if you're just doing Sultai worse or slower.
Phoenix, what are your follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Pongo hit it exactly, which is we have generic Sultai commander doing generic Sultai things just a little bit worse than some of the other generic Sultai commanders. I think he's a C tier commander. Maybe one day he'll get to B tier.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at too. I think I don't know why I keep saying where people are at. I can't get off of that. I think Arkelos has potential. I don't think it is gonna be there yet. I think there is something there with Scapeshift and I forget what's the Reclamation one that returns stuff from
Wilderness
your graveyard.
Splendid Reclamation.
I think there's something there. I don't know what, but I think something's there. But I will need to see more out of it. But initially, my thought is it's a C tier commander. What do you think, Ryan?
I think this is F. I don't see what everyone's seeing about this card. I've seen some of the strategies that people are talking about, the scape shift stuff, and this would be really great to do that. And I mean, I might put it at an E simply because it's in Sultai colors. This doesn't have anything I want in the command zone. It doesn't have card advantage. It doesn't have anything like that. Yeah, maybe we got some, if we're really looking for it, some breaking of parity. This reminds me a little bit of Calamax, where you kind of want him to kind of be on the battlefield in a certain type of way, which is tapped in order to kind of do some stuff with it. And Calamax really has a tough time getting there because of those types of things. So, if you kind of know what Arkelos is doing, you're never going to let him turn sideways to begin with. And so this is the type of commander where it's got this one effect, and that effect isn't that great unless you're really building around it. And so I would put this at an F, maybe an E, simply because of its colors. And maybe it's because I haven't seen some strategies that are like, bleeding edge that I just haven't caught in the last week. But I'm not really on this card, other than the fact that he's a really cool turtle. I like that.
Fair enough.
I just remembered that I'm upset about the fact that he's not Bant and he's Sultai instead.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna revise my answer to E.
I mean, he almost seems Bant, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah, and so it's weird that he's in Sultai. And
if it was a triggered ability, him being in Sultai would make sense.
Triggered ability, this would be a whole different conversation. It really would. But it's not. So,
up next is Kess Dissident Mage. This has kind of been the go-to Grixis commander for a long time, but now there's some new players in the game. Phoenix, is Kess still the best Grixis commander?
I think I'm willing to say no. I think I was maybe willing to say no before this even. I think that there's maybe an argument for one of the ones coming up. But I think that Kess encourages you to play spells that you would probably rather not play, such as Submerge and Massacre and other freeze spells, when you could just be playing a little bit more all-in on Nas. Okay. And I think that's a lot of what we've been seeing in the meta. I do think that she is very solidly A tier.
See, the way you worded it is, I thought you were going to be like, oh, she's like D tier.
Yeah, it really came out of left field with that.
Yeah.
She's just so bad.
He was dogging on her hard, and he was like, yeah, it's A tier. Yeah. Oh, this thing is hot trash. A tier. Absolutely.
You gotta set it up, and then once it's set up,
then dunk on him.
Tear it down. Yeah, I get it.
Fair enough. I think this is an S tier commander. I've been very high on Kess since she was spoiled, and I'm still very high on Kess. I think there is even some merit to playing Kess in the 99. Don't do that without thinking it through some more, but I playtested her in the 99, and she does stuff. She even has seen Legacy play, guys. She is a good card. And the thing that I like about Kess the most is that she just kind of rewards you for doing what you were kind of going to be doing anyway in those colors. She gives you extra advantage, and especially if you're going to be on a breach plan, she just maybe works against that to some degree, but in my mind, I think she just kind of adds another value piece there. So for me, she's an S tier commander. Ryan, what do you think?
I definitely think she belongs in A tier. She's Grixis, which is great colors. A lot of really good strategies could come out of Grixis. She's flexible. She's not a you got to build around me commander. She's like, I'll just make your spells better because you can cast them again. So you don't have to just focus everything on Kess or nothing, like some other commanders, like food chain commanders and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of strategies you can do with Kess. You can do Storm. You can do Breach. You can do Nas, you can do Twin. And so you have all kinds of really great things that you could get out of those colors, and she just makes those strategies better. I love that she has flexibility. I love that she's in those colors. 3/4 flyer, nothing to sneeze at. Blocks a lot of our format, with the exception of one flyer that's 4/4 and draws you cards. But anyway, we'll get to that. So I'm definitely big on Kess. I think she belongs in A.
Okay. Pongo, what do you think?
I live in fear of, some Grixis wizard just suddenly calling me stupid if I would deign to have an opinion on Kess. So I'm just going to agree with the big brains here and say Kess is solid. Definitely makes it into A tier for me.
Okay. So moving on to the next one is another new card. And this is something that I've seen a lot of people talking about with Tymna specifically, is Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. For me, I think this is a really solid B tier. I don't know. I feel like Sakashima's value is it's only as good as the partner or as the commander it's partnered with. And so with that, I think that holds it back from being an A tier commander. But seeing as that it's obviously going to be partnered with stuff like Tymna, other things of that nature, that obviously bumps its stocks up a lot. But overall, I think it's solid B tier. Ryan, what do you think?
So I try my best to try and not rank things on what they could be, but what they are. Just like I don't like to ding toolbox commanders because of the presence of opposition agent, and also I don't want to rank Vial Smasher too highly because curiosity exists. Sakashima that basically says I'm going to clone something, is nice in the command zone, and the fact that she has partner definitely makes her better. I think there's just a whole lot of unexplored space with her, so there's just so many unknowns because it's so new, and we might find this really great interaction one day, or one day we just might not, and she just ends up being Tymna times 2, which isn't a bad ability. That's still really good, but right now I think it's really too early to tell exactly what Sakashima is going to do. I think she is going to do stuff, but I don't know how powerful it's going to be yet. I'm going to put her in a B tier tentatively for now. And that might change in a year, basically.
So B with an asterisk.
Yeah, B with an asterisk. I like that.
Okay. Pongo, what do you think?
I think Sakashima is actually really sweet. In addition to everything you guys have already been discussing, where you can clone certain commanders like Tymna or Krark, for example, which can be, incredibly powerful. It's also a 4-mana mirror gallery in the command zone, and it applies to all permanents. And I think that's kind of an aspect that hasn't necessarily been explored that much yet. And I would be interested in seeing if in the future that, there's not any way to break that by, playing, let's say, not just legendary creatures that you can copy, but theoretically also like a legendary artifact that you could theoretically copy using, copy artifact type effects. So I think that, yeah, like Ryan really hit the nail on the head with this one, where I do think that there is some theoretical future directions you could take this deck, but the base case of it is quite strong. So this is solidly a B for me.
You just made me really sad thinking about the fact that there is a universe where we could have had in EDH multiple paradox engines.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was watching a historic stream where they had like Panharmonicon and Paradox Engine out, and there were like multiple Paradox Engine triggers going on the stack, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need more of this, please.
Oh, so good.
I will always miss Paradox Engine. I loved that card. But moving on, Phoenix, what are your thoughts on Sakashima?
Yeah, I can't wait for the third printing of Partners, where they print something that is in the command zone combo with Sakashima, is my evaluation of the card. I think that it is just sitting there waiting to be broken for a designer to forget that it exists. I do think it's solidly B tier. I think the power of the card is whatever you put with it next to it, and the more things that get printed, the more better things they are to pick from.
Right, and that's kind of going back to my point I said earlier. Like, I mean, this card's only as good as the card that it's paired with, and that means that its ceiling is really high and its floor is really low. But I think the fact that it has such a high ceiling makes it good enough, because of the fact that, yeah, you'll probably miss out on colors if you played Sakashima and Thrasios. But if you're going to play a Thrasios, like the Thrasios Kydel deck, right? Like, might as well just make Kydel Sakashima at this point. Because now you have two Thrasioses, and I could make an argument that's better.
Or two Kydels, you mean?
Yeah, two Kydels.
That would also be really good.
Yeah, tapping colorless twice, that's pretty strong.
That's true. Up next is Tymna the Bloodsower. This is another partner. This is an old school partner. And this is one that's typically paired with Tymna.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So it's typically paired with Tymna. Pongo, what are your thoughts on Tymna?
Well, so yes, you're absolutely right that Tymna and Tymna are, kind of like the most famous pair. But, Tana might be cheating on Tymna with Malcolm a little bit these days. I think that remains to be seen whether or not that version of the deck could also work. So I think Tana is, especially in the context of like the Metapod type decks that we're talking about, or, like the Rograkh Reanimator type decks that you might be playing Tana and Tymna together in. I think Tana actually contributes a little bit more than some of the other commanders who are like only there for colors do. Being able to put like extra bodies into play, relevant for Tymna specifically, like, just getting extra attackers is always nice. But also, you get extra creatures that you can sacrifice to Rograkh. If you're playing Blood Pod, you kind of get the scaling clock, which, might be relevant if you've already stacked the game out. The biggest problem with those decks is that they're not incredibly well positioned right now. I would say like the Rograkh type decks are a little bit better off. But I think Tana is pretty solid. I like her design. I think that she's at a power level that I would have liked to have seen pretty much all the partners at originally. But obviously, we are where we are. We live in our universe where that's not the case. I'm going to say that she is like a D.
Okay.
She's a little bit better than the other commanders that I think are largely there for colors.
Phoenix, what do you think?
I think the feeling that I get every time I hit someone with Tana and I make some saplings and I go, man, I wish I was playing Najeela, is really how I feel about Tana. It just seems like a mini Najeela that costs more mana to me. It is, of course, very good in the situation that Pako said, but it just doesn't tick all the boxes for what a cEDH combat commander would have to be, at least evaluating it by itself.
But you can get 4 colors. Take that, Najeela.
Yeah, isn't that the Silas Renn problem?
So I think I'm definitely on the D tier right in that area.
So for me, I think it is an E tier commander, because I think it is in the same category as Silas, where it's really only there for the colors. And it's the same thing as Silas, where what I said earlier is if another red-green partner came out that did something that was even slightly more relevant, it would get picked up immediately. What makes it better is kind of what Pongo brought up, in my opinion, is the fact that it does give blockers to Tymna or attackers to Tymna. But if the quality of this card is based purely off the fact that it pairs with Tymna really well, I don't think that it, has very much value. I think this is a horrible pair with Malcolm, personally. I think Team or Malcolm is a bad idea. I know that that's a hot take, maybe. But I think you have 2 fairly do-nothing commanders that one just happens to have an all-in combo with, and you're in Teamer colors, which is not great for that type of strategy. So for me, I think Tana's an E tier. Ryan, what's your take on?
I'm actually a little bit higher than you guys on this one. Tymna Tana is kind of the quintessential Tana deck for me. It's always the Blood Pod, Metapod kind of stuff. She does definitely, like Phoenix said, does not check off all the boxes, but she does check off one of the boxes that I think is very important, and that's a win con in the command zone. Stacks out the board and eventually just swing with your Saprolines and win. There's a certain degree of inevitability in there, so long as you can connect, and I know a lot of stars have to align, but that can be said with anything. Right. So I'm actually a little bit higher on Tana. I definitely agree with what you guys said with, a lot of times there's definitely games when she just never gets casted. Right. She's just there for the colors. And so I would actually put her at a C tier because of that potential win con in the command zone.
Okay. Up next then is Teshar. And this is kind of a newer piece to the kind of cEDH database, really, is this Teshar KCI deck that's been floating around there. Phoenix, what is your take on Teshar?
I'm not super well versed in the Teshar deck, but I know that it plays very similar to a deck that used to be on the database, which was Derevi. And it seems like changing to white has not solved any of the problems with that deck, which is mulligans are very important. This deck struggles a lot from that, from what I've seen, and I think I would solidly put it in the D tier. It can definitely have some really powerful openings and get there, but it has that mono white problem.
Okay. For me, I think it's E tier, and I think that is because, first of all, it's built around, but also I just think that this is a card where its deck's strategy dies to Rest in Peace, and because of the color it's in, it doesn't really have an effective way to get around that in any meaningful way. So to me, this is an E tier commander that has found a really cute strategy. Okay, I don't mean to say cute. I feel like that's very condescending, and I don't mean to say it that way.
Oh, I've been saying that all night.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to try and poke anybody personally, because I do think the Teshar KCI deck is really cool. Like, I think it's very cool. I just don't think it's, like, great. It's one of those let me put it to you this way. It is a deck that is cool to play because you want to see how it plays, and that's about it, right? Like, you aren't going to play this multiple times and take this to, like, a big tournament and be like, I'm going to... Unless you're Michael Levine with Heliod, right? Like, it's one of those decks where you're going to play it once out of curiosity and then never play it again, in my opinion. So, to me, it's an E-tier commander and deck. So, what do you think, Ryan?
This is a solid F.
Okay.
This is an absolute F commander. I don't even know why it's on the cEDH decklist database. I don't know if you guys have played with this deck or against this deck. This deck is bad. It's a bad deck. It requires a ton of pieces. It requires a ton of zones. It requires your commander. And all of these stars have to align in the single worst color in our format. And, you know, it's really hard to tutor up these pieces. It's really hard to get this combo going. You basically have to get assists from everybody at the table and hope nobody touches you. That is not what you want in a cEDH commander. I am not trying to dog on anybody out there building decks and loving this deck and stuff like that, but it's not good. it's just not good. I don't know. I don't even know what else to say at this point. It's a solid F. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Pongo, what do you think?
Counterpoint to literally everything that's been said so far. If you look at the cEDH metagame project, Teshar has, like approximately a 50% win rate against the field. So clearly we're talking about quite possibly the best deck in the format.
Oh my gosh.
Not just a good deck. So, I think I have to say solid S tier.
So it not only is it mono white, but it's also white hot takes coming from Pongo over here is what we're talking about.
Yeah, the data doesn't lie, right?
Yeah, he's got me.
Up next is Urza, Lord High Artificer. And this card is... So I'm going to lead off with this one, right? This is an S tier commander to me. It is the best mono blue commander by a what's the saying?
Texas mile?
By a Texas mile.
Yeah.
It is absurdly good. Like, I remember for a while, right? Like, it was all like, is Teferi the best one? Is JVP the best one? Is Azami in that discussion? And then Urza gets printed, and we're like, oh no, it's that. It's so good. It's in the best color, and now the Jeweled Lotus is out. Guess what you can play on turn 1 consistently? Your Urza. That's fun. So Urza's really good. I don't see any downsides to playing this other than the fact that I guess if there's a Curse Totem out, you can't use 2 of his abilities, but you're already playing a ton of mana rocks anyway, so who cares? Ryan, what do you think?
Definitely A tier. Very close to S. That Jeweled Lotus might actually kick it up. You're absolutely right when you say, as far as blue cEDH commanders go, there's Urza and then there's everybody else. They're all grouped into the rest of the categories because Urza is singularly the best. Infinite mana, sync in the command zone, breaking parity left and right with stacks pieces, fantastic color. is just about everything you could want in the command zone from a cEDH deck. It's just a fantastic card, and I like that it's not just only build around me, because there's a lot of it that is, but you could also do your stacks variant. You can also do a poly tyrant variant. That's really cool too.
Right.
I like people that are doing that kind of thing too. So there's still some fun, not necessarily, maybe fun's the wrong word, but there's still some cool shenanigans that you can do with him that you might not see coming. Someone might polymorph the construct out of nowhere and just get you, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I really like, I don't think it's S tier, but I definitely think it's A tier. Strong A tier.
Okay. Pongo, what are your thoughts?
I'm probably going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer here. I used to play quite a bit of Urza. Obviously, it's the type of deck that I would be interested in because of how hard he breaks parity on Static Orb and Winter Orb. Given the context of a certain commander we discussed earlier that shall not be named, that obviously appeals to me. But no, I actually kind of, through that time, ultimately left with the impression that Urza's kind of just worse Kinnan. So I ended up turning my Urza deck into Kinnan and working on that deck a fair bit. And while they don't play similarly whatsoever, I just find that for like that type of kind of like, artifact, scepter-y sort of, centric strategy, I just felt like going to Kinnan brought so much to the table, and Urza just always kind of felt a lot weaker by comparison. So I'm going to go ahead and say probably a B tier.
Okay.
Still good, but
Right.
again, I was always left feeling like the deck just isn't as good as a lot of people claim it to be.
Okay. Phoenix, what do you think?
Yeah, I think my hot take on Urza is that you could probably take off a random set of 2 abilities off of Urza, and it would still be a viable cEDH commander.
Yeah.
I think that alone pushes it past the A tier for me.
I don't think he would be nearly as good if you took off 2 random abilities.
Well, obviously not, but I think it'd still be a viable cEDH commander, and I think that's kind of the point.
It would be better than a Zami.
So if you take away the first 2 abilities and only leave him with the like infinite mana outlet, then like he's maybe marginally better. I'm not even sure if it's fair to say that than like Ambassador Loquacious or Loquacious or however that's
Ambassador
pronounced.
Loquatus, the Milk Commander.
Loquatus. Yes,
Oh.
exactly. The one where
Love it.
it's just infinite mana into milling everyone out. And if you get rid of the infinite mana outlet, then like obviously you're not really winning. You're just kind of making a ton of mana and like colorless constructs. So like I think he needs the whole package, maybe except for the first ability, to get there as a commander in cEDH. And I'd go so far as to say that if he didn't have the tap and untapped artifact you control ability, he, even with the 2 other abilities, he would not be there. I think that he needs to be able to tap artifacts for blue.
Yeah. But in the end of my argument was just I think he's S tier. I think that all 3 of those abilities together create a perfect storm of a very strong commander.
Yeah. The next commander on our list is a 2019 card. Or, excuse me, 2020 card. It feels like 2019 in my head because it was at the beginning of the year, and this year has just been ungodly long.
Mm-hmm.
But is Winota Joiner of Forces. This is from Ikoria. This is kind of a recent thing that Ian, comedian, MTG, kind of really pioneered this Winota stacks list. So, Ryan, what is it you think about this?
So Boros has always gotten a lot of hate for a long time, but Red has been getting a lot of boons over the past, I'd say, 3 years from a EDH and a cEDH perspective. The card advantage engine, I guess maybe the virtual advantage engine that comes from Winota in the command zone that you can kind of put that creature card on the battlefield tapped and attacking is really cool. I've seen the ceiling of this card, the turn 1 Winota, and just cracking bombs off the top every time and seeing what its potential is. I got completely hosed on it on a stream one night. Just Ian got on the stream and he played Winota and he just railroaded us. It was amazing. I loved it to see that Boros can be taken into a design space because what Boros does is it attacks, and
Right.
everyone says, we want a Boros that's a card advantage and all this stuff. It's like, well, the color identity has always kind of been you attack with these commanders. They're all attack-based commanders. And they really created this really cool design space with it, with this, pseudo advantage by attacking, and really fit really well into their proverbial corner. That being said, it's still a little
Hold
bit
on, Ian.
yeah, it's still a little bit more reliant. It's still in Boros, that doesn't negate the fact that it's in Boros, and it still needs to turn sideways. Now, it's thick enough that it can get through a lot of cEDH, a lot of cEDH blockers, so that's nice, but at the same time, it also isn't super great without Winota. If you're not turning
Right.
sideways, you're really just kind of floundering with Winota. So the floor is actually pretty low. The ceiling's great and high, but this floor is a pretty low floor. I'm going to put this into a D tier. Winota, D tier.
Okay. Pongo, what do you think?
Some excellent points raised by Ryan. I think if you when you read Winota's ability, it's actually absurdly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
As a single card, Winota is incredibly strong. She represents card advantage and mana advantage in Boros. And as the head of her deck, brings a ton of stuff to the table and, easily outclasses, even some of these stronger commanders we were talking about in terms of the ceiling of her ability. She's held back by Boros as a color identity. So, her 99 can only get so strong with the current card pool. And as a result, she doesn't really crack into the absolute top tier. That being said, I think that on her own, incredibly powerful, and the deck is quite good, surprisingly good. I'm optimistic that with time, Boros is going to get stronger cards. So I'm going to give her kind of a speculative C, in the hopes that, with a few new red and white cards being printed that are strong enough, she could conceivably really be a strong contender.
Yeah. Phoenix, what do you think of Winota?
Yeah, I haven't actually played against the deck at all, especially because it's pretty new. But I think I would liken the ability to something like Kinnan's activated ability, where there is whiff potential if you're manually doing it. And I think that inconsistency is what would lead me to put it in the bottom half of commanders. So that's why I think I would place it in a D.
But you're not paying 7 mana, and it's
Yeah.
for each non-human creature you control that attacks.
Right. So, maybe I'm a little optimistic. I hear all your arguments, and I'm going to say B tier. And the reason I think B tier is, so with Winota, I don't want to dock a commander because they're a commander-centric strategy, right? I don't want to dock too much from that, because there's so many... with the way things are going, right? There's Kenrith, which we'll get to. There's Thrasios, Tymna. There's a lot of these catch-all commanders that do very broad things and kind of let you do whatever. What I like about Winota is that she isn't that, but she still allows for some... I think the word I'm looking for is some creative liberty, where you can kind of take it in a few directions. Obviously, Ian has very successfully taken it in a stacks direction, and it has been very good. But to me, I look at this and I go, for every non-human that's attacking, you may put a human creature from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and they're indestructible. I just think this has too high of a ceiling for me to put it anywhere below C. And I just really think that in the current metagame, this is a deck that really can be successful if it just, especially with Jeweled Lotus on the horizon. This is very easily can be a turn 1 commander. So that's kind of where I land on that card. Moving on is to probably a much more classic cEDH commander. is Xur the Enchanter. Xur's been around the block. It has been around. When did Xur really pop up? Really? Gosh. It's been around as long as I've been playing cEDH.
He's the quintessential cEDH commander.
Yeah.
When people think of cEDH commanders, they think if they've been playing for a long time, usually Xur is the one they choose if they were pre C16.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like Xur is just like timeless in cEDH. You know, there's never been cEDH without Xur.
Yeah.
So Pongo, your opinion then, where would you rate Xur?
So interestingly enough, if you had asked me this maybe like a year and a half or so ago, and I'll contextualize why in just a moment, I would have said, you know, solidly like an A tier commander, you know, overshadowed a little bit by like Thrasios Tymna, you know, overshadowed a little bit by, you know, some of the other less commander centric, you know, more colored commander pairings or commander options that can kind of do a similar thing. But, you know, obviously necropotence in the command zone, like absurdly powerful. So, you know, 100% needs to be in like the top 2 ranks as a result. But, you know, with the printing of Dockside Extortionist, you really feel not having red now. And with the printing of Underworld Breach, you really feel not having red now. And I think that Xur's stocks have taken a massive slide as a result. Because, and I say this because I played against Xur like actually not too long ago. And, you know, on their ad nauses, like, you just feel not having the Dockside. You just feel not having that Underworld Breach so much. They're just like way less powerful, way less consistent. You know, you get hurt by stacks pieces that much more because you don't have this incredibly explosive, powerful play that you can make. And you don't have the ability really to tutor for like one single incredibly powerful ritual. So yeah, I think I have to say that Xur has like slid into the B tier and is probably sliding more, you know, as new cards get printed in colors that Xur doesn't have access to.
Phoenix, what's your take on Xur?
Yeah, I think 2-3 years ago, if you told me that I would think that Xur is one of the slowest ad nos decks in the format, I would tell you you're crazy. I do think that we are at that point, though, and I think that is why it slid for me. I think I agree with Pongo where it's right about in the B tier, where without those key red cards, you aren't quite as explosive.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go a step further than Pongo and you and say it is properly C tier and getting worse. I feel like every year I have played cEDH, I have watched this card get significantly worse every year. And because especially it's the Storm Nas thing that it does, it's just not as good as the other ones that are doing a strategy. Again, I could only say this so many times, right? We've all kind of said the same thing, is not having red is huge, but not having red is huge when your only dockside is Phantasmal Image. That's not great, right? Like, you're not in a good spot. I just think Xur has not... If white gets substantially better in the next year or so, I think Xur can make a comeback. But a year, maybe like 3 years ago, I would have said Xur is S tier, and I just think it's C tier now. What do you think, Ryan?
I'm basically in the same train you are. I think Xur is C tier. You don't see Xur anymore. I'm actually surprised that you played against Xur, Pongo. It's been supplanted by... Yeah, yeah, exactly. You don't see Xur anymore. And there's a reason for that. Xur was the king, and it's just been supplanted. And it's not that it's not great. It's just that doomsday strategies, those just aren't the strategies anymore. There are much better things that have a little less fragility, you know, or a little less frailty to them. And, you know, shimmer options and stuff like that. It's just not where we are anymore. We've just kind of evolved from that, and Xur never did. Missing red, just like everyone else has said, is really big. Esper colors, you know, black blue is great. That's why we gave Yuriko what we gave it. but just this, this Necro in the command zone is nice, but it's just not enough anymore. Unfortunately, we're asking a lot of our cards nowadays, where we actually do things like cut counterspell, because it's just not the best counter magic out there. Right. When we're making those kinds of hard cuts, we really ask a lot of our cards. And I would put Zur in the same tier that I would put something like Selvala. Used to be great, just unfortunately didn't evolve with everything else anymore. And so now I think it belongs in C.
Zur reminds me of like what Modern looked like before Modern Horizons. And we kind of think of Zur as like that cEDH, and this is what cEDH is, right? And we kind of think of Modern as like Modern plays this way, and it's these type of staple cards. And then Modern Horizons happened, and then Modern is quite interesting to say the least. Zur to me really represents that this is old cEDH, and it feels like it's that, remember when this was really big in Modern. It feels like that, where you reminisce on those old cards. Like remember when like Spike Feeder was a card that was played in Modern, for crying out loud. Those were the days, right? That's kind of how Zur feels to me. Phoenix, you looked like you wanted to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say imagine cutting Mana Drain from a deck, but...
Imagine doing that.
Well, Mana Drain is strictly better counterspell. Why would you run...
strictly better enough?
Yeah.
What a world we live in that's the conversation that we're having, by the way.
I mean, I think it's a great world. Yeah. I think it's fantastic when our card quality is so high that we're saying, do I really want to pay 2 blue for my counter magic? That's a lot to ask. I'd love that we have that conversation.
Next up on the list is Elsha of the Infinite. Who was it I started with last one? Was it Ryan or was it Pongo?
Pongo, I believe.
Okay. So, Jeremy, you and I saw Elsha when it got previewed last year and both immediately fell in love. What is your thoughts on where it kind of falls on the tier list?
I think it's very middling. It has gotten better as red has gotten better, but I really wish that white was a different color pip on this card. If that was any different color, I think we would be talking about this card a little bit more favorably. But it is very nice that we get Enlightened Tutor, and that does allow us to combo and win the game off the top of our deck. But it is 5 mana. I think it is solidly C tier. I don't think that it is a fast enough deck to compete with a lot of the Turbo Naw strategies going on, but it is close.
Okay. I put it in B tier. And part of why I put it in B tier is partially because of when it first came out, remembering how bananas that card was. I was getting wins left and right, like out of nowhere with this card. Where I would just slam it down, and I think I won in our league like 5 weeks in a row with Elsha, just because nobody could really do much about it at the time, and it was hard to interact with. That being said, I think this is a Kess-like deck, or a Kess-like card, but because of white and because of how bad white is, it pulls it down a lot, so that's why I put it in B tier. What do you think, Ryan?
I probably would put it in B tier as well, mostly because Elsha is not one of those pick it up and start winning with it decks. Some decks
Correct.
almost pilot themselves, and Elsha is not one of them. If you don't kind of know this deck, you're going to flounder. It's nice to have that, prowess up the top and stuff like that, and with the pilots of this deck have been really pushing it far. I would have normally put this in a C tier, but I've actually been bumping it up to B tier because they're getting to Gitrog levels of obsession with this deck. And we're coming out with win con-less versions of it where just every card is just a banger. Every card is a good card on its own, where they almost don't even have any quote-unquote dead card combo pieces. Like, every card is usable in so many situations. And when you're really starting to push those design spaces is when you really start to see a lot of good things. And just like you said, Callahan, it's, we're seeing, people are just winning over and over. We have a league in our Discord where people playing Elsha are they're just destroying people. They're destroying them against Turbonaut strategies, and they're destroying them against all these other different things in Breach and stuff like that. And it's just doing so well. And that's why I would put it in more of a B tier. It's not A, it's not S. I don't know if it'll get there or not unless we get some amazing card that gives it a huge synergy that we've never seen before. But I definitely put it in a B tier.
Pongo, where would you rate it?
So right off the bat, I'm going to say I don't think Elsha really gets past the C for me. And my reasoning behind that is that I think the biggest problem with Jeska is that it's not Grixis. So with Elsha in particular, as a 5 mana commander, if I'm not mistaken, you typically want to mulligan quite aggressively, and I think every Sans Green deck wants to do this to some extent. Mulligan quite aggressively to get a lot of acceleration, a lot of artifact based ramp. But the problem with Jeskai in that sort of whole scheme is that you don't then have access to a lot of tutors to be able to necessarily find your payoff. Elsha is an okay payoff, so she's a consideration. She's on this list. We can talk about her, and she can make it as far as C, just based on her strength as a card. But not having consistent access to your Dockside Extortionist, not having consistent access to your Underworld Breach or your Intuition, even things like that. Really, I think hamstring her to a large extent. And kind of make it so that, at least for me, she doesn't get past the C.
You know what's funny, and I just thought of this, and I'm sure people who play Elsha a lot already know this. You can play Breach off the top at instant speed with this card.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That is bananas. I didn't think about this until just right now.
Yep.
That's instant speed Yawgmoth's is hot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes me go B tier even more. Holy cow. Up next is Inala Archmage Ritualist. I always have a hard time saying this one. Phoenix, what do you think of Inala?
Yeah, I think I'm probably higher on Inala than a lot of people. I think it is just barely edging Kess out in quality, mostly because you don't ever have to cast this card to get the benefit out of it. You can play Grixis good stuff, and you just have a one-card combo in the command zone. You play a Spellseeker, you copy it, and you get 2 spells to win the game, whatever that may be with the version of the deck that you're playing. But I think I'm really high on this card. I think it is really high A tier. I don't think it's S tier. If it actually did something out of the command zone, it may be S tier, but I think that not having to cast it puts it up into the A tier for me.
Maybe I'm underselling it. I think it's C tier. I think it's such a build-around card. I know this is a hot take because a lot of people really like Inala, but I just think Inala is not that great. I know it's good, but I don't think it's A tier good. I think when you have to play a bunch of wizards, some of which aren't that great, to really get the full potential out of it, I'm not going to be super on board. To be fair, this is an infinite combo in the command zone, right? Like, I don't even know if they're still on that strategy anymore.
Wanderwine?
Yeah.
No.
I don't think they are.
Yeah.
Phoenix shaking his head, looking like a little scared, thinking about what they're actually doing these days. Yeah.
But it's just one of those things for me where it's just like, I think, not Pongo, Cobblepot and I have talked about this before when we were talking about deck building, is sometimes you have to sacrifice quality in your cards based on what your commander is. And I think that brings her down, especially when compared to Kess, because Kess doesn't have any requirements other than, hey, you're playing Control and you're playing Ad Naus and you're playing Demonic Consultation. Would you like to play those more? And that's really all I see from Kess, and I don't see that same level of value from Inala. So for me, Inala is a C tier commander. What do you think, Ryan?
So, my my world of color pie always kind of it lends itself to playing to its strengths. Like we talked about Winota and turning sideways for Boros. That's what Boros does, and it does it well. Grixis for me has always been the spell slinging storm commander. We all know that Eminence is a really good ability in the command zone. I mean, really can't interact with it. It's a triggered ability. What are you going to do about it? And so that lends itself a lot to Anala. But when I'm in Grixis, I don't want to play creatures. I want to play spells, and Anala lends itself to playing creatures, so it's more tribal. And now, granted, it's in really good colors, and the wizards are good. Like you said, everyone gives you the quintessential Spellseeker synergy, and that is fantastic. But at the end of the day, with my Grixis commanders, I want to be doing more what Kess is kind of giving me. And I would put Anala more into a B tier because of it. She's not bad. B tier is a great tier. I think Kess kind of just wins in the Grixis area in my opinion. So that's why I put her B tier.
Pongo, where does she fall for you?
Well, I think once again I'm going to be the voice of dissent here. So for me, Anala 100% needs to be at least A tier. And I'm like almost pushing S tier. So I'm going to say very high A tier. And my reasoning as to why will probably reveal at least maybe some philosophical differences that I have with you guys that might explain, some of my more actual serious selections and actual serious rankings that I've done today, and put them into context. So
I thought all of yours were just memes.
I'm
gonna have to go back and do some research now.
The large majority of them are memes. I'll say that much. And I'm open to shooting this video again at some point with more sincere thoughts on the matter. But so no, I think I value having a 1-card win condition incredibly highly. Especially in Grixis, where you have black tutors, and so that means that your 1-card win condition is pretty much on tap almost at all points. All you need is some mana, and that's not that hard to mulligan for. I think Anala is incredibly powerful, incredibly fast, and beyond that, kind of not that easy to interact with because there's a lot of resiliency built into her combos just by virtue of the fact that she's playing reanimation spells as combo pieces, but also it just provides redundancy for her combo. If you counter the Spellseeker and she has a reanimate in hand, then she's fine, she just combos off again. So it's the type of deck that can just keep pushing for wins turn after turn after turn, and is capable of generating value, maybe not as well as some of the other Grixis commanders can, or Grixis X commanders, but reasonably well. So I think that Anala is actually one of the strongest decks in the format, personally.
Okay.
And just for reference on how crazy Anala players are about Anala, just like the Frog players, I think both of the primers that I just looked on the database have a 20-step combo and a 21-step combo.
Oh my gosh.
Oof. All right.
For any Anala players listening out there, please don't come after me.
You can come after me. It's fine.
Up next is a 2020. Is this really a 2020 card? Holy cow. No, it's 2019. It was the very end of 2019. Is Kenrith the Returned King. We've done a lot of talking about Kenrith on this channel. The Mad Lad himself, Cobblepot, really loves this commander. So with this card, I don't see how this is not an S tier commander for me personally. Let me just put it to you this way: this can be a Turbo Druid list. This can be a stacks list. This can be a what's it called? Opus Thief list if it really wants to be. It can be whatever it wants to be, and it will be really good at it. And because of that versatility of being able to be whatever, because with Najeela, right, you kind of have to be somewhat on an aggressive strategy of I'm going to turn stuff sideways. And it's I'm going to do a lot of stuff around my commander. And she's S tier. Kenrith has all the same benefits as her and doesn't need to be on the aggressive Najeela strategy. I think that in and of itself puts it at S tier. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I couldn't believe how relevant pay 2 and a white, gain 5 life was.
Right?
In this format. And you would think, like, out of all the abilities, why is that the one you picked out? You know, because it just kind of every quarter, every 3 months, we keep seeing a brand new thing with Kinrith at the helm. I mean, he's bringing back Hermit Druid. It's a strategy that we were like, this is kind of like the old days of Xur kind of thing, you know, like Hermit Druid has kind of been supplanted. We've moved on, but the fact that he could bring back Xur is really saying something. And when you're sitting down with a Kinrith deck, he could be on any number of strategies, like you said, you know, and he's a 5/5. You know, that blocks pretty much everything except for flyers. I mean, so your Tymna strategy has been shut down. You're not drawing a card off of me with this in here. Now, it is more expensive, and it does cost white to cast. That is a mark against it, in my opinion. I've seen, but everything else, you better not cast your Thassa's Oracle with Kinrith on the battlefield. He'll make you draw a card and lose the game. What do you know? He combos with Dockside. We found a way to break Dockside, guys. So and he does this with Dockside and Phantasmal Image and does this crazy combo. And they're just finding more and more ways to break him with these generic abilities that just kind of cater to their colors. And that's what I think is so cool. The red enables Hermit Druid to go, and if you kill Hermit Druid, you can just activate the ability. It gets around stack strategies with the casting one spell because you just activate abilities. He's fantastic. I can't think of another thing that you could possibly staple on this on another card to make this better. He's S tier for me, 100%.
Pongo, King K. Rool, what do you think?
You know, speaking to that you know, target player gains 5 life ability, I just wanted to emphasize that target player part of it because it came up over the weekend that I actually ended up having to give one of my opponents life. So yeah, not only can you gain 5 life or, you know, any amount of life kind of on tap, but sometimes you can do some really, really tricky, like wildly intricate and fun things with Kinrith. Because, you know, he can be used kind of like as a group hug commander. That's not really the way that you ever intend to use him, but, you know, sometimes cEDH games get weird. So yeah, 100% that gain life ability, surprisingly relevant. So I'm going to just say that I think that Kinrith is, for me at least, technically S tier. I don't actually necessarily think that he's as strong as a lot of the commanders that make it to S tier. You know, he might be more on par with some of the commanders that for me would be in A tier, and I'll get into the reasons why. So for me, one of the big issues with Kinrith is that you either want to play him in a deck that does not care about Kinrith at all, except as like a really kind of like backup plan, or is like really trying to go slow so that like you can eventually get your 5-drop into play and start extracting value from him. He's not as good at like the pure mid-range game as like Thrasios and Tymna might be, even like Tymna Crom, for example. So what that means is that he's really good at kind of going over the top of those types of decks, especially if we're talking about like a slower Tymna Crom type deck. But, you know, if you're intentionally trying to play like something similar to what you might do with Thrasios and Tymna, but doing it in Kinrith instead, I think that in a lot of cases you're actually kind of hamstringing yourself. You're kind of hurting yourself because you're just giving up on the potential to play him as a value piece in a lot of early game situations. But, you know, I do love playing him in like my ultra slow combo with Rule of Law shells because, yeah, 100%. Like there are situations where he is absolutely the best creature, like bar none, that anyone has in play. And so if you get the time to leverage that, then yeah, he's incredibly strong. So I'm gonna say that he makes it into S tier for me, but there's some caveats there.
Phoenix, where do you rate him?
Yeah, so I think I'm right on board with what Pongo's saying there, where my two big dings that would take him out of S tier, if I would even do that, which I'm not, would be that I have to fetch white early in the game if I want to play him early, and I have to pay 5 mana. That's pretty much it. If he was more aggressively costed or didn't cost white, I think he would be solidly somewhere in the middle of S tier, but I think that much just pushes him down a little bit towards the bottom. Maybe even my lowest S tier commander.
Okay. Interesting. Next up is a very controversial commander, is Korvold Fakehurst King. Ryan, where does Korvold fall for you?
I did not like these commanders that came from the Brawl decks. I did not like how they built them. They built it to push this Brawl format. That's where they came from. Chulane, Korvold, that's where they derive. You can't build a weak Korvold deck. You almost have to try to make a bad Korvold deck. He's just so good. And that's the same thing with things like Chulane. So I didn't like Korvold from the get-go. I didn't like what they were doing with the design space. I didn't like what they were trying to push to get people to buy these Brawl decks or this product. And Korvold was kind of just grouped in with that. So because of all that, he's just inherently really good. He's all the abilities you want in the command zone. And he can be built a number of different ways, but certain ones just kind of bubbled to the top. Obviously, the ones that people know the most about is the food chain Korvold. We're seeing more of a Turbonos Korvold now. He's got that card draw. Hold on. He's got that card draw ability. He gets bigger. He's a flyer. He's in good colors. But I guess I just have some biases with him because of it. He was just designed to be broken, is what he was. He's like, here's a really good commander, card advantage, all this other stuff, and just right. There's just no downside to this dragon. So, food chain, some people have their complaints with food chain strategies and stuff like that, but he's also in a Turbonos strategy, which is good. But he's tough. He's tough because I have these biases against him. But I would put him in a. I hate to say it. I'd put him in a B tier. I'd put him in B. I'd put him in a B tier. I wouldn't quite send him over the top to A, and he's definitely not an S in my book. But I'd put him in B.
Pongo, what do you think of Korvold?
I agree with pretty much everything Ryan said. I think this card is an abomination.
Yeah.
I just think that the design is like so unbelievably pushed, like so generic and like uninteresting. So yeah, I agree entirely that I have like serious issues just with the card itself and kind of what it represents. As far as tier goes, I'm probably gonna have to go with B as well. Largely for the same reasons that Ryan touched upon. I think that he's incredibly strong. His probably the biggest strike against him is not having access to blue. Obviously, like if you win on turn 2 or turn 1 even, you feel that a lot less. But that's not realistic for the most part. And by the time you're getting around to turn 3, you really feel that like not being able to necessarily always have consistent access to protection for your combos. So yeah, B tier for me.
Phoenix, where do you rate Jeez, I can't talk. Phoenix, where do you rate Korvold?
Yeah, I think I am sensing a theme from all of us, which is none of us really like the design of this card. It's definitely a fun deck to play sometimes, but it just feels bad a lot of the times where I'm just, all right, I'm just playing the game by myself and I'm drawing all my cards and somebody stopped me. All right, it's your turn. I definitely think it's B tier. I think that this deck lacks a lot in stack interaction, which there's a lot of in our format. but it definitely does not lack in speed.
I'm in a weird spot. I think, in my heart, I think this is S tier, honestly. I think it could... For me, I have seen this deck be... I have never seen this deck be bad. And I've never seen this card be bad. Even with it not being able to interact in much the same way as a Grixis deck or a Sultai deck could, I have never seen it underperform. I've seen it be stopped. You can absolutely stop it, but I've never seen it be bad. And for me, the fact that it just its ceiling is so high, I can't rate it lower than an A, personally. And so I think it's an S tier card personally. I just think I've never seen it be bad. And I don't think there's a world where it is bad. And like we've touched on, it is so generically good that it's very difficult for it to be bad, right? Like you'd have to go out of your way for this card to not be good and for a deck around it to be bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really where I land on it. Our next card, we're starting to wrap up. We're on the final 5. Is Crom Ludevic's Opus. This is the final partner on the list. Pongo, what are your thoughts on Crom?
So I think Crom is fantastic. I'm maybe a little less high on this card than quite a few people are, but not by much. Just because a lot of people think that, this card is better than Tymna, for example. And I don't know that I would go that far personally. But, they certainly make an excellent pair. And Crom, is certainly very, very powerful. Don't get me wrong on that front. I'm going to say that Crom probably makes it into the A tier for me. Not quite as good, at least in my opinion, as the commanders he is frequently partnered with, whether that's Tymna or even Thrasios in certain cases, but extremely strong. You power him out and you've got this 4/4 flying haste thing that starts pressuring people immediately, and that's incredible. And certainly he is a solid source of card advantage, depending on what meta you're in and to what extent people are willing to play around that. He, for me, kind of seesaws between S and A.
Okay. Phoenix, what are your opinions on Crom?
Yeah, I'm right on board with exactly what Pongo said. I think that Crom is very, very good. I don't think it quite measures up to a Kenrith or a Thrasios or a Tymna, but I think it is close, and that's why I'm going to go with A tier. It does everything you want a commander to do.
I would agree with that. And I think Crom is a really good black-green commander away from being S tier, personally. It is so good, and if it could move into a strategy that doesn't need white and still be 4 colors, it would be bananas. So I'm going to go with A tier as well. Ryan, where does it fall for you?
I think this card got overhyped. I think people got really, really hard on it for some reason, and I've heard people on Twitter say, well, I've drawn 8 cards in a rotation, that's why this card's so good. And I'm like, yeah, but you've also drawn 0 cards in a rotation before, so if we're going to evaluate one, we need to evaluate the other as well. He cost 5 for a 4/4 flying haste, so he's passing all the vanilla tests, which is nice. The fact that he gets haste and attacks with Tymna right away is really nice too. Not trying to base something based only upon the partner it's with, because I didn't want to do that with Tana, for example. But getting smacked with 4 in our format where life is a resource is formidable. The fact that he blocks flyers is formidable. The fact that he hovers over the ground pounders is formidable. Is it colors? I can't deny that it's a good card. I don't think that when people say that it's better than Tymna and Thrasios, I think people are kind of out of their minds there.
I agree.
Yeah, they're definitely drinking the wrong kind of whatever here. That's not true. That's simply not true, in my opinion. Crom is definitely an A for me. He's good. He's a really good commander. He's not as good as what people are making him out to be. He's getting overhyped here lately, but he's still a solid A.
So next up on our list is the definitive food chain commander, Niv Mizzet Reborn. And Phoenix, what are your thoughts on Niv Mizzet?
I just think that there's no way they could print anything better. It has 5 colors. It gets a combo. It wins with just food chain. You can get creatures. Oh wait, sorry. It's the First Sliver. I think it is solidly high A tier. I've seen this deck be insane, and I've seen this deck sit there doing nothing with a 5-mana commander it can't cast. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I think that the deck really struggles when you get really grindy and it can't actually land a win. It is very, very good at landing a win when it is on course, though. And so I think it is very high A tier for me.
Okay. For me, it's very high B tier. Mostly because I have seen our friend Max just sit there and do nothing with a food chain for 4 or 5 turns and then lose. And that's not the only reason. It is really only good in food chain, right? Like you're not playing this with anything else. And I feel like food chain as a strategy is considerably worse than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, etc. And I just think food chain as a archetype is a C tier archetype overall. But this does the food chain thing the best, and the most efficiently and the most successfully. So with that being said, I think it's very high B tier. What do you think, Ryan?
I think it's A tier. Actually, really definitely leaning towards B, because while it is at the best at its strategy, it's still food chain strategy. So, I mean, food chain requires so much setup and so many zones to be good. However, this does have all 5 colors to be able to execute its plan, which is really nice. So you can easily strap in something like Adnaz to get you there as well, which is, just an inevitable win, or something like Tainted Pact becomes better because you get your Cast from Exile creatures going in there. And so because it has access to all 5 colors is really what kind of sends it over the top. That being said, I think I'd probably actually end up in B when all is said and done. 5 colors, great. Still on food chain strategy, which is just, it's really falling out of favor more and more as in cEDH as time goes on.
Yeah. Pongo, where does it fall for you?
I think I would say it's a low A tier for me. I hear what you're all throwing out, and I agree for the most part. I think that food chain is certainly less well positioned than it used to be. That being said, it's still not bad at all. And the one thing that I would hold against the First Sliver is that you don't get to run Hydroid Krasis as a combo piece. But I mean, that's if that's like the one thing that keeps it from the S tier, then I guess that's fine. No, but in all seriousness, I agree that food chain has lost a lot of its luster recently. And I kind of hinted at this before, but as some of you probably know, I maintain kind of like a layered First Sliver deck that looks to combine breach combos with food chain and push into more of like a fast turbo Naz direction. Kind of doubling down on this idea that if you're playing the First Sliver, you're not going to succeed in the long game anyway. So let's just not play the long game as much as possible. Right. And I think that this is an interesting direction. Whether or not it's better than traditional food chain is not something I'm willing to comment on at the present time. But at least as a deck building exercise, I think is very cool. When you realize that the brain freeze that you're running for breach is also an outlet for your infinite casts of the First Sliver, and you cascade into it and you mill everyone out. And you get to run things like Intuition, which can theoretically tutor food chain, just like it can tutor Underworld Breach, proceeding through Savine's Reclamation, stuff like that. Like, it's kind of cool. Like, I think that, again, as a deck building exercise, I like that deck a lot. I don't think that pushes it, beyond A tier for me regardless, though.
Next up on our list is the Gitrog monster. The Dredge deck. We've talked about it a little bit before. And where it lands for me is kind of tough because it reminds me a little bit of Zur to some extent. Oh, it reminds me of a different age in cEDH, right? Where Gitrog kind of ran a lot of stuff for a while. I don't know if it's nearly as good as it used to be. I still think it's one of the top decks. So for me, it probably lands in A tier somewhere. I don't know where in A tier it would land. It's not B tier. I don't think it's S tier, but I think it's right there around A tier. And it's good. But again, it's one of those dies to rip decks. But the difference between this and Teshar is it has outs that it can get to. Ryan, what's your opinion on it?
Solid A tier. And I think the reason it did not go the way of things like Zur is the fanatical devotion behind it. I've never seen a more passionate set of people build this deck. And it's because of that group of fans that has made sure to keep this deck relevant. They used to be on things like Ebony Charm, and then they go to more to the win con list type wins, to where just the card quality is so high in this deck. I've seen Gitrog all the time just steal wins just out of nowhere. Just get there. Just steal wins all the time. And you're like, man, I didn't even see that coming. Just suddenly it was Frog and then win. And you just got there. And that still happens in pods to this day with Frog. And the pilots of Frog are usually really good at it because they just love this deck so much. As a strategy, using Dredge, and there's not a whole lot of things that exile/destroy lands. So these lands matter decks have a little bit more built-in protection than others. And it has some of the best removal in the format with your Abrupt Decays and your Assassin's Trophies and stuff like that. It definitely sits in the A tier for me.
Okay. Pongo, where does it sit for you?
I think that, and this is, a bit of shade, I just don't see how you can put the First Sliver below the Gitrog monster in the tier rating. I think that they have to be at least in the same tier, or that the First Sliver is probably a little bit better than the Gitrog monster. We can talk about this another time, but I think that the Gitrog monster, I agree with a lot of what has been said. It's a fantastic deck. The people who play it are fanatically devoted, and I think that the Gitrog monster Discord server is a very interesting place.
Yep.
Very fun place.
Yep.
And so I think that the community around this deck might be one of the best parts of the deck. As far as its standing in the meta now and things like that, I do think it has fallen off to a certain extent. I don't think it was quite as powerful as it used to be. It lacks interactive options to interact with the decks that are faster than it, and there's an increasing amount of decks that are faster than it. So it's not the type of deck that is really racing anymore, and it's also not the type of deck that is necessarily outgrinding people or beating their stacks pieces that easily. So it's kind of in an awkward position. So personally, I think that it's going to be a high B for me.
Okay. And Phoenix, where does it fall for you?
I think I evaluate this right around an A, but there's a specific situation when it's definitely an S, and that is when you have chains of
Mephistopheles.
Mephistopheles out.
Yep.
You have a Sylvan Library and you have a Dredge trigger, or a Dredger in the graveyard. Because to resolve this situation, you need a third party.
Every time.
Any REL.
Yeah.
But also, technically, out of REL, you would need a third party to confirm that you're doing the correct things with the correct cards. and I just love that, and that's why it would be S tier.
So are you putting it in S tier?
No, it is A tier.
Okay. I was confused for a moment.
It is only S tier in that specific situation.
Okay. Next up, we've got 2 cards left. One is Godo Bandit Warlord, and Ryan, what is your take on Godo?
S tier, next commander.
No need for anyone else to say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on. S tier, top of the S.
We're all
No, actually,
locking in our S's, yeah.
I hope you have enough space left on your hard drive because we're about to go deep, my friends.
All right.
So there's obviously, I have a special place in my heart of Godo Bandit Warlord. It was what got me into cEDH. It's what got us started on the channel. There is a certain degree of following around it. Not as fanatical as Godo, but we definitely, the Red Love, we definitely go deep on Godo. So the thing that I think is really great about Godo is that everybody underestimates Godo once.
It's true.
and that's when he wins. And then they never underestimate him again because they're like, mono red, whatever, and then they just kind of ignore him and then he wins. He never ramps into nothing. You counter him. You just, you ramp to 11, you counter him, you just ramp to 13, you just ramp to 15. And the deck does it very well. It ramps. It's the 1-card combo. You basically just cast your commander and win because it fetches up its combo piece by itself. That being said, it's in red. It's monocolor. So you lose out on all the other stuff that this format thrives on. There are just certain things that it just struggles with because it's in red and because it's monocolor. I'm not a fool and say that this is top S tier and stuff like that, but it's in the S tier next commander. So
Pongo, what is your take?
So if you had asked me, a few months ago, I would probably be pretty low on Godo. Sorry, Ryan. I would probably go so far as to say like D tier a couple of months ago. Just because, while Godo obviously did have all those explosive potential early wins, all those avenues, as well as, a reasonable kind of later game plan of just like trying to recast Godo. It always kind of felt like, oh, this deck is fairly easy to disrupt once you're kind of on to what it's trying to do. So I do agree with that notion that it's the type of deck that you learn to respect, or that you should give a certain amount of respect to. But, it's the type of deck I also felt that once you give it that amount of respect, it's not that hard to beat. All this being said, now I see 2 kind of interesting forces pulling in 2 completely opposite directions that lead me to want to sort of reevaluate how I'm rating this deck. On the one hand, there's Opposition Agent, which is an incredibly powerful piece against Godo because it kind of just means you're never choosing to search for the equipment. You're never going to get got by it because Godo is a May, so you just elect not to search if they decide to cast their Opposition Agent in response. But obviously then you need to answer the Opposition Agent. I do think that this is something that Godo decks more recently have kind of skewed towards being able to do surprisingly well. Drannith Magistrate was the first punch, and now Opposition Agent is, the hook. So I think, the deck is tuned with the requisite answers to deal with these really impactful hate bears. So that might not be so disastrous. But on the other hand, what the things that work in Godo's favor, and I'm not 100% sure where the Godo community lands on these things, but, at least for Jeweled Lotus, I can say, I think confidently that this is an amazing card for the deck, and every Godo player agrees. And then more precisely for Jeska's Will, that's the card I'm not 100% sure where Godo players land on, but
we're big on it.
I suspect that they ought to be very, very high on that card, given that it's just kind of a turbocharged Seething Song in most cases. And I think that getting those 2 cards, just the general power level of red these days, all this stuff kind of makes me think a little bit more highly of Godo again. So I'm gonna say like low C.
You made it sound like you were going to go like A tier there, the way you set that up. It was like when Phoenix was talking about Kess, and he's just dogging on it. He's like, oh, it's A. And you're over here like talking about how great it is, and you're like, it's low C.
He went from D to C. That was his escalation.
It's, the deck does still, like I was saying, have some issues, in the sense that the game plan is pretty easy to preemptively play around to a large extent.
Yeah.
It's telegraphed.
Yeah.
So that's a huge downside to it.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep dominating this conversation. So,
No, you're fine.
I absolutely love this deck. So another thing that I've always absolutely loved about Godo was also its downside is that he's the force to be reckoned with. He determines your mulligans every time, because they're like, we need to be able to answer a potential turn 1 Godo Helm, because that's a very real thing that deck can do. A turn 1, turn 2. Once it gets dealt with, everyone's good, because he wins turn 1 or he wins turn 10. He doesn't win anywhere in between. So he's first 3 turns or he's like turn 10. He never quite recovers as well. And I'm just joking, of course, but that's what people mulligan to Godo. People say, oh, well, I can't advance this game plan because I need to hold my Nature's Claim to deal with the turn 1 Helm or turn 2 Helm. Those types of things. And that helps Godo a lot too. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Phoenix, we've heard Pongo and we've heard Ryan talk about Godo a lot. You and I played this in Sisse, believe it or not, as an alternative win con.
Ooh, spicy.
Yeah, it was really fun. You'd like tutor it all the way to the top.
Yeah.
Phoenix, where do you? What'd you say?
Hammer of Nazan is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where does this fall for you?
So, Godo is eternal. I think Godo has eternally been about the same tier for me as soon as Helm of the Host got printed. I think that the deck has changed and the meta has changed, but Godo has just stayed. And as you see commanders like Selvala, Yisan, and Zur get left in the dust, Godo is just still there. Still counting to 13.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a
11,
cockroach.
excuse me.
11.
Yeah.
11.
You just can't get rid of him. He's like a cockroach.
He is.
I think he's solidly B tier. I think that ever since I have played against Godo the first time and got, I've always been like, that's pretty good. And he just keeps doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Red has gotten so absurdly good recently that I can't put Godo anywhere that's not an A tier personally. And I mean that as somebody who doesn't play the deck, has played against it, and doesn't really have any fond feelings for it. So I feel very unbiased towards this card. But the fact that a monocolored commander that's not named Urza, that's not in blue, can be this effective, this consistent, and this powerful for as long as it has been. We're talking, when did Dominaria come out? Like 2018? 2017? Somewhere in that
Yeah,
ballpark.
a couple years now, yeah.
Yeah. And it is just, like Phoenix says, it stood the test of time, and I could argue it's gotten better. I might surprise some people with how much I like this deck. I actually think this is like one of the best decks to start out with in cEDH, because of the fact that the game plan is very straightforward, but you also learn the layers, and Ryan could probably attest to this, is that it's really good, and then it tiers in how good it is with the player's familiarity with the deck. And that really, for me, is what pushes it up into A tier.
Yeah, it's a deck that grows with you. It's not one of those decks like where you're like, oh, I've got to learn. I got to goldfish this deck a whole bunch of times before I can even get the base combo down and all this other stuff and decide my mulligans. It's always a joke that it's like, if you can count to 11, you can play cEDH because you just play Godo. But you learn to it really does scale with you because you start to get a little bit more into the intricacies of it and things like that. And that's what I've always loved about it. It's a lot like Frog. You get very devoted to it. Because in some aspects it is an underdog, and like I said, a lot of times it doesn't get respect when someone doesn't know it, and then you kind of just always get them that way, and I've always loved that. So
the last card on the list is probably very underwhelming in my opinion. After all the stuff we've talked about, but it's in my opinion one of the best cards on this list is Tasigur the Golden Fang. So this one. So we're just going to start. We started with Ryan as the first one. We're going to end with Ryan as the first one to go. Ryan, where do you fall on Tasigur?
So Tasigur was kind of that 2018 kind of commander era. You saw a lot of Tasigur. He was the kind of, him and Sidisi were the kind of Sultai commanders that you saw. I like that he can cheat commander attacks with the Delve ability. I like that he can be an infinite outlet in the command zone. I like that he's in Sultai colors, the best colors we can play. Red is quickly supplanting that, of course, but for the longest time, Sultai was the definitive best. He's been falling out of favor here as of late because he hasn't, and it's not because he doesn't have strong strategies, but he just never received any real silver bullets that kind of kept pushing him forward. It was always just, well, we have these really good Sultai cards, and now you're going to have those really good Sultai cards. So he kept kind of getting overlooked by the shiny new toy that came out with each set. So he's fallen out of favor a little bit, but I don't think overall he's just bad. The format's gotten a lot quicker here as of the last, kind of 12 months. And so he hasn't kept up with that. So I definitely think that's knocked him down a rung simply in that aspect alone. But I don't think he's just become actively bad. But that's just my opinion. That being said, I would put him in the B rankings. He used to be in the A's. And not having red has been hurting him over the last 12 months. And so that's the only reason I think I'd knock him down to a B. So
what a world we live in where red has become this good, where we are knocking people for not, like, cards for not having red.
Yeah, you consciously feel the lack of red when you don't have it now.
It used to be green. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We used to joke that green, was like carbs, where like no meal feels complete without carbs. No deck feels complete without green. Mm-hmm. That's increasingly becoming red.
Yeah.
So Pongo, then, what is your ranking of Tasigur?
So I think it goes without saying, if you're packing the powerhouse that is seasons past, you 100% catapulted straight into S tier. But if you're unwilling to take the plunge and devote yourself to the strategy and that the beauty that is that card, and you're playing something suboptimal, like, I don't know, like Sinestra's weird Tasigur Neoform Eldritch Evolution pile,
I don't know who would want to play that.
I mean, like, that's just like strictly worse Thrasios, right?
Exactly.
That's definitely like C tier for me. Regardless of how good Sultai is, like, it's just worse than a lot of the other options at this point.
Phoenix, where do you rank Tasigur?
Yeah, I ranked Arkelos as generic Sultai commander playing generic Sultai things as a C tier, I think. And Tasigur is generic Sultai commander doing generic Sultai things, but slightly better. And so I think that he would definitely land in a B tier for me.
Interesting. So you guys ready for the hot take of the century?
Always.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is an S tier commander. I genuinely do. And the reason is, and you're going to laugh at me and you're going to roll your eyes and you're going to go, oh, he's just the guy who runs Lavinia. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He plays a bad deck. Here's where it comes down to. I don't think Sultai has gotten any worse. I just think our attention has been drawn to red right now. And this is one thing that I will say about Magic players until the day I die, is we have the attention span of a gnat. So we get drawn to the new shiny thing. Sultai has not gotten worse. Red has just gotten better. And so everybody's attracted to it. Everybody wants to play it because it's the new shiny toy. Sultai hasn't gone anywhere. Sultai hasn't suddenly become suboptimal. Just because everybody's playing Dockside and Dockside's really good doesn't suddenly mean that not playing Dockside is bad. Although you could make an argument that playing Dockside is the best option you could possibly make. And I think that's very valid and true. But one of the things we're looking at with Tasigur, and we kind of evaluated Thrasios along these kind of axes, is having the ability to... He is aggressively costed, right? Even though he's 5 colorless and a black, it might as well read 1 black, right? With the Delve ability. He might as well read 1 black. He has an infinite mana outlet in sitting in the command zone, and sure, it's 2 green, 2 blue, whatever, part of that. We've already established that is not a hindering part to why we would hold it somewhere. This is a deck, or not really a deck, this is a card that can do what you want it to do. It is lower end S tier for me, to be fair. I would probably put it below Kenrith, right above an A tier. But I think this is just in the same classification as a Thrasios because of its versatility and because of the fact that, I mean, you could go on an infinite mana strategy with this and still do whatever you want with graveyard shuffling, with whatever sort of strategy you decide to go to. It's still really good. And that's really where I land with Tasigur. I think Tasigur's still a top tier commander.
So, yeah, my biggest point of disagreement there is that I do think that the green-blue, the hybrid green-blue and the mana cost is a major strike against as far as doing the infinite mana shenanigans. If that's what you're going for, then like Thrasios becomes immediately a much more attractive option. And Kenrith has the same issue in that regard. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's one of the things that makes him so much worse than Thrasios for that strategy, is because you can't get him down before infinite mana a lot of the times because he's 5 mana Kenrith. And in addition, you need to be able to make like white and infinite blue after you've started making your infinite colorless. And you know, these are all major things that 100% make Thrasios the better option for that type of strategy. Beyond that, you know, Tasigur folding also to graveyard hate, kind of major factor that Thrasios doesn't necessarily fold to. You know, Kenrith doesn't necessarily fold to that either. You know, I think one of the strengths that Tasigur has is that like you can lose your Time Twister and still win in like a win conless type deck, but like now everyone's playing Thassa's Oracle anyway, so like that's a little less relevant than it used to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just think that like Tasigur gets outclassed on the infinite mana outlet front severely, and also gets pretty heavily outclassed like as the generic value piece compared to Thrasios and even Kenrith, I think. Pretty substantially, and additionally, you know, also kind of gets outclassed when you factor in that he has like a few other random vulnerabilities. So I don't know. I think that he's far from S tier for me.
And I could very well be overestimating the value of this card, and that's probably very, very real. But I don't know. It's Ryan. What's your kind of thought on that?
I still would probably still put him in the same tier. I know that the pips, the hybrid pips in his infinite mana sink, I'm not too concerned about, no more than I would Kinnan. Right. You know, he's got green blue, or you know, other ones. So you just build it a little bit more. Folds to Rest in Peace, sure. Lots of other cards do as well, and it has answers for that. I like it goes more win conless. I've always kind of had a preference for those types of decks. They're a little bit more complicated to pilot, but I love that you just don't have dead cards. I like that. It's really tough for me to say, is this as good as Thrasios? Because of course not. It's not as good as Thrasios, because once again, like we said at the very beginning, Thrasios is the yardstick in which we measure everything. Right. So by that association alone, it's not as good as Thrasios because it's not Thrasios. That's the kind of the top one. I know that it is just kind of one pip to cast because of the delve ability, but that doesn't mean you're casting it turn 1. It just means that you don't spend a lot of resources to cast it when you do. We're moving into a faster meta, which kind of knocks it down a bit because it does play mid game a lot more than it does play super fast combo. But like I said, I still probably put it in the same place. Still the same tier.
Absolutely. Well, that is about all we got today. After 3 hours of recording, Pongo, what is it about? It's always you. Every time you are in the recording session, we go long. I'm blaming it on you. It has nothing to do with my idea being a long-winded one. But Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You've kind of, I've said this before, you have been such a great lobbyist, maybe not the best term, but advocate for the cEDH as a format and as a game. And I will always be appreciative of you, and I'm glad that you were willing to come spend 3 hours of your Thursday and talk about Commander with me.
I had a great time. Thank you for having me. This has been fantastic.
Awesome. I'm really glad everybody was able to come on, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That helps us out. And again, you can check out our Patreon page where right now, and you can you'll get access to our Discord server, and you will also get access, depending on which way you go, you also get your name on the credit sequence if we ever get there. So thank you all for tuning in and watching, and we'll see you next time.